Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, AI community without borders, and welcome to our second edition of How to Set Up an AI Center of Excellence. Thank you for being an active part of this future-driven community, and thank you for being here with us today. We feel privileged to count you among over 500,000 AI enthusiasts in over 100 countries. Please share with us in the chat where you come from, and let's unite for a strong community that stands for respect, tolerance, and peace, no matter where you come from or what culture you have. So in this sense, why wait? Act now and make peace. The last 2 years were incredibly challenging for all of us. During this time, reaching global levels and collaborating with partners around the world really opened our eyes to what is happening, not only in the fields of technology across organizations and industries, but also well beyond that in regions and societies. As you all know us, we are a strong believer that new technology can unite people and boost our societies and economies. Now, please allow me to share with you a very personal anecdote. Last December, my almost 102 years old grandma died in the night of the 7th candle of Hanukkah. On this same evening, we were celebrating and singing with her via video call, while she was living in Israel and we in Switzerland. Technology did unite us. And you won't believe, due to the difficulties and the difficult circumstances of the pandemic, we were only able to join her funeral via video streaming. An extraordinary but very touching experience. Again, our family and friends around the world were able to be united and accompany my grandma to her grave. A lot of things went through my mind. Being on this world for over 100 years, she experienced a lot of great developments like fridge, washing machine, fax, moon landing, internet and email, smartphones and video streaming, but also world wars and various pandemics. But she was always a strong believer in the human being, its strength to adapt and to learn, to respect and to tolerate each other. Her generation should be a great role model to all of us. How we can cope with changes and challenges, and especially how we human beings should unite. So let's learn from this generation how to build a comprehensive life of excellence. Our team does its best to connect people in this global network with over 500,000 followers and bringing you the latest AI news on a daily basis. We also regularly bring AI leaders and domain experts together, either here publicly or in our exclusive boardrooms, discussing and sharing best practice, worst failures, highlight successes on potentials of cognitive technologies by considering all aspects. That brings me directly to our topic of today, how we set up an AI Center of Excellence so that we don't get stuck in the proof of concept trap and we can recognize return on investment fast. To get there, however, many components come into play. We brought 19 leaders and experts together for the next 3 hours to show you how various standpoints that starting off with AI is yet complex but not impossible. The speakers will reveal all the important factors, fundamentals, do's and don'ts. We will dive into topics how innovative technologies and data privacy can go hand in hand, how starting off with AI is really only a short phase of our revolution, and what the future of work will look like. Our grande finale is also absolutely worth the wait. Franck Gazzola will be on stage, whose TEDx speech from 7 months ago received over 82,000 views. Quite impressive, I must say. I'm personally very excited having him on our virtual stage later on this agenda. He will not only explain how important it is to leave our comfort zones, but also how we can benefit from AI in freezing water under the polar sea ice. An incredible 3 hours to come. Please benefit from the crowd and keep the discussion going on in the chat. Connect, exchange, and ask questions. Watch out for the polls and handouts from the speakers and connect with each other on LinkedIn, and Twitter. Dear audience around the world, let's kick off today's conference focusing on the big how we started off organizing on their AI journey. Privacy is a big issue. So is trust in our technology. Why wait? Act now and share for success. Dear Alexandra, may I invite you as our first keynote speaker on our virtual stage. Hi.
Thank you very much, Dalit. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be here and to have the honor to kick off the event today. So
thanks a
I
lot.
think so many.
Yeah. Let me just introduce you quickly to the audience so they
Sure.
know with whom they're going to have to deal with for the next few minutes. Alexandra, you are such a great woman in tech, and it's my honor to have such a woman with us today on stage. You're really inspirational from so many perspectives. You are a responsible AI, synthetic data and privacy expert, and serve as Chief Trust Officer at Mostly.ai. As a member of the company's executive leadership team, you are engaged in public policy issues in the emerging field of synthetic data and ethical AI, and responsible for engaging with the privacy community, with regulators, with the media, and the customers. You also host the Data Democratization podcast, where you discuss emerging digital policy trends as well as responsible AI and privacy best practice with regulators, policy experts, and senior executives. Besides Mostly.ai, you serve as the chair of the IEEE Synthetic Data IC Experts Group, and were also invited to join the group of AI experts for the Humanize Initiative. Very instantly, thought your research work, you gained deep insights into GDPR's impact on the deployment of AI in Europe and its economic, societal, and technological consequences. You're also the co-author of an ICLR paper and a popular blog series of Fairness in AI and Fair Synthetic Data. I'm very curious about that to hear more from you. This has been actually featured in Forbes, IEEE Spectrum, and by our distinguished AI expert, Andrew. Wow, a very interesting bio, Alexandra. I must say, please lead us into the world of privacy innovation and synthetic data. Alexandra, the virtual stage is all yours.
Thank you very much, Dalit, for this wonderfully and kind introduction. Hello, everyone. Unfortunately, I can't see anybody, but I hope you can see and hear me well. So I have the pleasure to kick off today's event with the first keynote, and I'll be focusing on one of the fundamental challenges for organizations, both when they start out with artificial intelligence, but particularly also when they want to scale it or even build an AI center of excellence. And this fundamental challenge is, how can organizations in our regulatory environment today reconcile data access, utilizing data, innovating with data, and developing AI algorithms on top of this data with privacy protection and making sure that the privacy of the customers is preserved. And this is a problem that can be solved with synthetic data. So some of you might already know what synthetic data is, but let me give you a brief explanation. With traditional anonymization techniques, the challenge is that you cannot anonymize today's highly granular, highly behavioral data with traditional anonymization approaches like masking or obfuscating, for example. Why is that? Those approaches are destructive in nature. So they take existing data sets, like, for example, the financial transaction data set of a large bank, and to say it simple, they go through this data set with a black adding and try to remove all of the fields that they deem to be re-identifying. The problem here is, because everybody is so highly unique and because there's so much data available nowadays, you have to delete nearly the entire, sorry, I'm just getting some back noise here. The problem with that is that you have to delete so much data that there's not much left for AI to be trained on. But the even bigger problem is that research has shown over and over again, despite deleting so much data, oftentimes you can only retain 1%, 2% of the available information, it's still easy to re-identify customers. So what researchers concluded is that anonymizing data with traditional techniques just doesn't help companies to overcome this fundamental challenge of accessing data and using it for AI training. A nice example here is that in the banking field, research has shown that with credit transaction data, and if you think of your own credit transaction, quite likely you will have a few dozens, if not a few hundreds of those per year, only 3 of those transactions are sufficient, where you only reveal the merchant of this transaction and only the date, nothing more, nothing about you, not what you bought, not the amount that you had to pay. Just these 2 data points of the 3 transactions are sufficient to re-identify over 80% of customers. And this is a huge problem for organization because according to GDPR and many other privacy legislation, anonymizing data is the only way to get out of the privacy obligations and to have data available that you can use in a privacy safe form. But the technologies that we had available just don't work for that anymore. And that's the exact reason why synthetic data was invented, to help organizations bridge this gap between innovation, data access, data democratization, and privacy protection. So this was a bit of a primer on traditional anonymization. Now to the question, what is synthetic data? Synthetic data, AI-generated synthetic data, is an approach of anonymizing data that's different to the one I described before. With AI-generated synthetic data, you have software that's installed, for example, at a large bank, to stay with that industry as an example, and that they use to let the algorithm train on their existing data sets. And automatically, these algorithms can extract the patterns, the behaviors, the time dependencies in a given customer data set. To say it simple, the AI can help this organization to understand how their customers behave. And then in a completely separate step, the technology is used to create new synthetic individuals and, for example, their synthetic financial transactions from scratch. With those synthetic individuals and their transactions, you have the exact same statistical properties of the data. You have the same granularity, the same structure, the same time dependencies. So if you were to train an AI algorithm on this synthetic data versus on this original data, you would get the same results. But there's no real data point or no data point in there that connects to a real individual. It's impossible to reverse engineer this approach. It's impossible to re-identify a person in that data set. And therefore, synthetic data is a technology that can help to solve this fundamental challenge of accessing data, which is one of the first steps for an organization to even start out with artificial intelligence and have the data available that they need to train these algorithms. To give you a few use cases how this is used in AI training. One component is that in many enterprise organizations we work with, the challenge is that accessing data is something that's rather restrictive. What we hear from the industry is it oftentimes takes months, sometimes even up to 6 or 8 months until you get access to a data set. And then potentially it's traditionally anonymized and doesn't provide the utility that you as a data scientist need. With synthetic data, you can free up the access to data and have all the creative minds in your company look at this data, play around with it, and develop new ideas and new AI solutions on top of it. So data democratization and increasing the diversity of who can access data and who can innovate with it is one component. But we all know there's quite some AI skill gap out there in the world, and not many organizations are already fit and have the skills to do their AI journey themselves. So collaboration is something that's quite interesting, either with startups, with AI vendors, or with partners to build up whole ecosystems of new digital services. And here, as you can imagine, sharing data is a corner element to just be able to build up all these AI services. Synthetic data can help organizations to do this rather easily. Another aspect to consider is talent attraction and talent retention. We at Mostly AI work with structured synthetic data, mainly in the banking and insurance industry. And as you know, banking and insurance are rather heavily regulated industries. So they particularly struggle to attain top and attract top AI talent because everybody from the data science world knows, well, it could be quite challenging to get access to data in those types of companies. So what we hear from our customers is that synthetic data now is also a fundamental aspect for them to attract more top data science talent, because it just makes working with data so much easier. And since Dalit mentioned it, another component that synthetic data can help to not only bridge the gap between innovation and privacy, but also between data innovation, data utilization, and ethical aspects. For example, fairness of algorithms, explainability of algorithms. If you look into today's world, one of the main challenges for the European Union, for the UK, but also on a global level for the OECD and the World Economic Forum, is to figure out which guidelines we should bring into place, which regulations we should bring into place to ensure that AI is trustworthy and serves us as humans and not the other way around. And here it's also increasingly important that you can have AI assurance ecosystems, have strong partner organizations, AI auditors, or people who help you to validate whether your algorithm exhibits certain biases against minorities or not. And all of this really needs data as a common language, a lingua franca, to share and collaborate on. And the fair synthetic data Dalit mentioned earlier is another interesting concept where you can create synthetic data that not, as I explained earlier, tries to quite accurately replicate the original, the real world, but where you as an organization or we as a society can decide, well, there are certain historic biases in data, for example, the gender pay gap or something like that. Let's mold the data in a way that we can have a data set where there's no difference in pay for males versus female employees to make sure the downstream models are fair. So quite a few ways how synthetic data can help you to access data. Oh, sorry, I just had a noise there. So quite a few ways how synthetic data can help you to access data and thereby lay the groundwork to collaborate within your organization and also externally. I'll close, and I hope you will enjoy the rest of the event. I'm definitely very much looking forward to the coming talks, not only about the components or the basic components of building an AI center of excellence, but also what organizations can do to escape the POC trap, as we just heard, and what else is important between data and technology. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, just reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'm handing back to our wonderful host, Dalit. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexandra, so much for all these insights. It's indeed very interesting. And I think many of us would love to hear much more. And as you mentioned, reach out to Alexandra via LinkedIn and also in the chat right now. And before, well, actually, I have one question just came in. Let me read it to you.
Sure.
How do you make quality assurance in the synthetic data creation if you don't have access to the full real data sets for verification?
That's a very good point. So the way our software works, we are not data processors. We provide the software to, let's say, a bank or insurance organization. And whenever they create a synthetic data set, there is this original training data. And in the process of creating synthetic data, in parallel, there also happens some quality assurance where it's calculated how close the synthetic data is to the original compared, or how close the original is to the synthetic data. Plus, of course, organizations do their own quality assurance. So whenever they start out with synthetic data, they both have their domain experts, for example, medical professionals, analyze the data to see whether the, medical diagnosis of the people and how an illness developed over time are realistic, but they're also performing AI training on original data versus synthetic data for certain data sets where they have access to the data, and then they use this knowledge and this confidence to synthesize data in similar domains where they don't have access to the original data. So just a few measures to do that.
Thanks a lot. What I really liked also is what you said is that we need to increase the benefit for the human being at the end of the day. And there are a lot of questions even raising in myself. And I would say, let's keep on this discussion. And I would love to organize like a roundtable in a smaller group to discuss that. One final thing that I would like to just have your comment on. for us, it's really important to raise awareness about the importance of the whole data sharing and also the possibility, what does it mean, synthetic data? So what do you think is the best way really to raise awareness and to explain that people do not need to fear that and that they see the added value about cooperating and sharing their data, but also be open for companies to use and actually develop synthetic data?
That's actually a very important point that you're raising. So there's still quite some fear out there when it comes to sharing your data, having organizations work on it. And I think it's the responsibility of each and every one of us who has more insights into the inner workings of artificial intelligence and data utilization to take these topics and bring them to the general public so that they get more education and more information beyond the science fiction AI is going to take over the world storyline that we all know so well. So I think that is one step. And then, of course, also for organizations to adopting new technologies that have been developed just to bridge these problems that we pointed out, like synthetic data, like privacy preserving federated learning, like homomorphic encryption, and so on and so forth. And I also love your idea of having a roundtable discussion on that, because one aspect that I'm particularly passionate about when it comes to synthetic data that I didn't focus on in my main talk is actually the possibility to have open synthetic data. We just did a project with the European Court, with the European Research Center from the European Commission, where they looked into providing open synthetic cancer data from 15 million Europeans just to democratize access for researchers and enable data-driven policy making. And I think once we handle the privacy component, there's so much value we can reap from artificial intelligence that not only is benefiting the businesses, but really us all as a society.
Absolutely.
And I think that's so important for us to keep in mind. Thank you so much.
Great, thanks a lot. It could go on for hours. It was really an honor to have you with us. Take care and keep safe, and see you very, very soon again. Bye, Alexandra.
Thank you very much, Dalit. Bye.
Now it's my great pleasure to introduce you to our first panel. The discussion will be focusing on the fundamentals and key components of AI Center of Excellence. What does it really take for any organization to start off on the AI journey? Let's look at this topic from all possible angles, such as the challenges of data availability, data quality, and data accessibility, technological infrastructure, as well as ethics and societal acceptance. This panel is chaired by our legendary Thomas, the AI nerd, and he is joined by Majella, Pedro, Albert, and Lee. Majella, a very good evening to you in Sydney, Australia. You are a senior data and AI strategist with more than a decade of experience working in more than 40 countries across Europe. I think we need somehow to change the picture because I still can see Thomas instead of Majella. Thanks, great. So you have been working through Europe, Asia, Africa, North and South America. You have established a great track record in management consulting and specialize in strategy, innovation management, and performance. You work at the intersection of science, art, and technology using data and AI to explore and solve sustainable and climate change issues. With you, we have Lee. Good morning to you, Lee. Lee, you are a thought leader, early adapter, industry organizer, and general agent provocateur in the world of technology fueled business process transformation. You have a colorful career spanning over 30 years, leading large companies through high-stakes operating model changes. You have also founded and grown several businesses in the BPO and automation industry, while leading industry groups such as Chair, IEEE standards in intelligent process automation. My pleasure to welcome you with all the other experts. With you, we have Albert. Albert, you're dialing in directly from the Scottish AI Summit. I do hope the event has been going well on your side, and we're very thankful that you making it into our virtual stage. Albert, you are the Chief Data Officer in the Scottish government and lead the Data and Digital Identity Division, the Center of Excellence for Data in Government. You're passionate about unlocking the power of data in Scotland while focusing on trust, transparency, inclusion, innovation, and sustainability. Drawing on experience in digital and data across public and private sectors, you are responsible for delivering platforms that enable data and analytics, fostering data innovation and policy in data, identity, and AI. With you, we have Pedro. Pedro, a warm welcome to you too. You have been with Takeda for 7 years and are responsible for enabling digital innovation and intelligent automation, as well as supporting the digital literacy of the workforce. Your view is that successful technology adoption starts with shifting the mind and hearts of the people. It's my great pleasure to welcome you on this global reaching stage. Now, Thomas, aka AI Nerd, thank you for being with us again. It's always a great pleasure to have you with us. Now, to those who don't know Thomas yet, besides checking him out on LinkedIn, Thomas, you have more than 20 years of experience in business administration and information systems. You are an expert in intelligent automation and AI systems. You're a LinkedIn influencer with more than 100,000 followers and host of your own AI YouTube channel. As CEO and founder of instarel.ai, you automate content creation for thought leaders. Thomas and my dear panelists, a warm welcome to all of you. Thomas, let me hand over to you. The virtual stage is yours.
Well, thank you. You also mentioned that I smell wonderful. That's the other thing that people maybe don't know. You know, I don't know how this discussion on AI COE is going to go, but what I do know is that we have the best looking group of the entire conference all together right now. Little high five to ourselves, best looking. And whenever I can average down the IQ of any meeting, I do it just by joining. All right, listen, let's start off with some ground leveling pieces. We're going to discuss about having an AI COE in reality, the examples. But, you know, if I was to pick, let's go with Pedro. Pedro, level set us. What does a COE mean to you?
Look, from my perspective, the COE has really got a very big goal, and that is the goal to make sure that the investments which are made into AI, they find their way into productive solutions, which can then be further scaled. So we're protecting really, as a custodian, these investments by the structure which we put in place in order to really create oversight over all projects and the ideas we have, but as well deliver with a robust framework and standards in place, reliable solutions, which can then really be taken into production, can be operated, and can be maintained to really create value over time. So in addition to that, it is as well the role of the Center of Excellence, in my opinion, to create knowledge and leverage that knowledge, diffuse it to the rest of the organization, and with that as well, bring everyone around the journey with AI and create that trust into solutions, which then can be applied broadly. So in summary, I would actually say that the Center of Excellence is the innovation engine of the organization to take forward these solutions built on AI, ML, potentially as well, combined with other technologies such as automation forward, and with that, be able to, like in our case, bring forward better treatments for our patients.
That's a fantastic definition. Honestly, probably one of the best ones I've ever heard, and relevant to your industry and others. Lee, maybe go to you next. Where do you think AI actually plays in then to a COE, or how does an AI COE matter? Talk to me a little bit about AI and its role or the COE role around it.
Well, I think Pedro made a really important point, which is productive solutions. And the COE is really intended to be an engine that creates production systems or intelligent systems. It's rare that AI exists unless you're talking about the endless, expensive, and failed data science experiments that have occurred over the last 10 years. AI rarely exists in isolation. So the COE needs to have deep data expertise. It needs to have outstanding program management. It needs to have the process owners, the business owners, executive sponsors. Agile is a great framework in order for a COE to operate. And it's really a matter of bringing these things together and, not surprisingly, moving through a cadence of assembling a solution in which AI plays an important role. And there are as many uses for AI as you might imagine in such an expansive word as AI. I try not to use it. I call myself a practicalist when it comes to AI, because I'm very, very focused on COE structure that naturally ejects those who tend toward data science experiments. It really needs to be something that gets into production. And my own experience in putting AI systems into production back in, I guess it's 5-6 years ago now, my first systems where it was a far more inclusive group. Infrastructure turned out to be critical. Obviously, database and data lake expertise, in addition to the data experts. And so it's a much broader than any COE that I've been a part of before or since, in terms of the folks that are involved.
Yeah, absolutely. You made a really good point that maybe I'll go to Majella with next. Is, from maybe a perspective of from vaporware to actual, from data experiments to reality, where maybe a data strategist would play within that to enable that. So you're not just wasting endless dollars of innovation and money and investment. How, Majella, maybe give us a perspective from the data strategist's point of view.
Yeah, so of course, having a center of excellence allows for your expertise to focus on developing the use cases that support the overall business strategy, and of course to drive innovation. But it's this connection with the overall business strategy that cannot be underestimated. I think that when we quite often start our journey on trialing and experimenting with artificial intelligence, we run the risk of what we can call pilotitis. And that is, we get into that mode of this pilot, then this pilot gets funded, and you start small, and that's a good way to start. But it never scales. There's a risk that, it sees its day, and then you go on to the next small effort. And what we really want to be able to do as data strategists is not only identify those use cases that can support the overall business strategy, but we can identify those use cases and scale them within the organization. And I think that that's a way that we've always got to be conscious that this pilotitis exists, and that we really have to work and embed these use cases, and especially the successful use cases that drive the business strategy forward.
And we'll circle back around some examples. I'd love to hear how you took something from pilotitis to production. But maybe first, let's give Albert a bit of an example to give us on the reality of their COE as they enable businesses. So more of a business-to-business enablement. Albert, give us an example of where you've really been successful in enabling an AI COE to fruition.
Yeah, well, thanks, Thomas. So I work in the Scottish Government, so we work across the whole of the public sector in Scotland. So that spans everything from healthcare through kind of education, justice, and so on. And so just, I'll pick up on a phrase that Pedro used that I really like, that innovation engine. That's what our COE is all about. It's about catalyzing the opportunities that AI presents and helping public bodies in Scotland to seize those opportunities. And one of the key ways that we do that, particularly early in that sort of life cycle when we engage with people, is that we take them through what we describe as an AI health check. And that's partly about making sure that they're in the right place in terms of their data strategy, for sure, but also that they've got a really good understanding of the business outcomes, the public value that they want to create through these things, so that we can make sure that they are actually going to, I love that phrase about pilotitis. We sometimes say there's more pilots in the public sector in Scotland than there are pilots in British Airways. But let's avoid getting into that space. Let's make sure that we actually unlock that value and take these things into deliverable concepts. And so that AI health check approach is kind of a nimble way of making sure that people are thinking holistically about these issues. And the final thing I'll say about that is that, as well as the if it's like technology, data, and business outcomes, it's making sure that they're thinking really carefully about the ethical, moral, and public acceptability issues that sit around often these technologies. And so we get them to a place where they really understand the steps they need to take if they're going to take that next step and catalyze innovation. And indeed, we can understand how we can help them unblock the things that might hit them. So thank you, Thomas.
Yeah, of course. And I think you made some interesting points about the health check and maybe the public perception of what you're doing with AI, because it has some different viewpoints on it. But Pedro, maybe from the pharma perspective, who's has to watch the public image of what they're doing, especially with data and technology, maybe walk through an example in pharma where you have maybe identify the challenge and how the AI COE helped overcome that to get something to production.
Yeah, and I think throughout literacy and as well a lot of the publications, you may have understood that there is a vast potential of use cases for AI to deliver value within life science or pharma, right? So just to give you some examples of work we have been doing at Takeda, or maybe as well relevant use case for other pharmas, right? There's a lot of focus right now to finding better treatments through the use of artificial intelligence and use of machine learning, and with that being able to discover molecules which really have got a potential to to treat our patients with better solutions, so that they obviously have a better health potential as well. So if I just take back now the view into my center of excellence, which is focused on digital innovation within our finance organizations, we've been looking lately at NLP and AI algorithms to support a better understanding of how our people in the organization feel about the sentiment they have on how we support them, right? And through the use of AI are now better in position to predict where we need to reach out and react in order to give them more details, maybe potentially more trainings, and help them throughout some of their challenging ways with systems and processes which are in place. Another use case, similar to that, is that we're using AI nowadays as well for fraud detection and some of the invoicing and travel and expense areas, where classically you have a lot of records to scan through, which is almost impossible to do with humans, and where AI can really play quite a differential role to make sure that you don't have reputational damage, for instance, from, let's say, behaviors in the workforce, right?
They're fantastic examples. Let's shift gears slightly. Let's look, if everyone's watching, get a pen or a virtual pen, but let's go to you, Mr. Lee Coulter. Give us the one thing you should always do and one thing you should never do when setting up an AI COE.
So one thing always to do is have very proactive and early conversations about an organization's genuine appetite for embracing the lessons that will be learned along the way. Executives have a tendency to look at those as failures. They aren't. They're lessons. The many storied examples of great innovations that were preceded by lots of lessons learned along the way. And despite lots of very public words about tolerance for failure, when you've spent $1 million and spent 9 months of important people's time and there is a failure, this is really essential that you embrace failure in a very different way, that you have structures in the COE to celebrate the lessons learned, the greatest lessons learned on a weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annual basis. Celebrate the people and the teams that helped to bring those lessons to bear. This is a huge shift, and is really a backdrop necessary for successful COE. On the flip side, the thing to never do is allow your use case to grow beyond your data domain. And this is, again, it's a death knell. When we initially create a use case and we go and do the data strategy, and I'm sure Majella has many stories about this, there's a great tendency to continue, oh, well, let's include that. Let's move this let's go this much further. And this is the greatest and riskiest thing you can do in these projects is when your use case extends beyond your known, established, controlled, and high quality data domain. And it's incredibly easy. It is so attractive to want to just grow it by a little bit. And when you do so, you've introduced risk that really can't be managed anymore.
That's fantastic 1-2 advice right there. And Majella, I mean, actually, maybe take that a little further. You know, when you're setting expectations of known, you know, of your use case, of your failures, of your successes, what are you doing in practicality around messaging and continuous improvement of that process?
Yeah, so you know, you've got to do this continuous messaging. I think that there's several points that you can do to develop continuous improvement and communicate. And that is, first of all, you've got to communicate the value of the use case at different levels of the organization, and not just once, but lots of times. You've really got to make sure people understand that value. Spreading success stories. I think that, you know, this can help us avoid pilotitis and doing too small incremental, you know, incremental changes, because there is a tendency to not take some big risks. As Lee just pointed out, you know, you've got to, you know, there is on one hand, you've got to balance the incremental nature of business and change management with the opportunity. And I think that, you know, that's spreading those success stories gives people a little more courage to accelerate their work and implementation, and, you know, aim for a high level of ambition. Then, of course, there's this, you've got to do this continuous upskilling and recruitment of talent. And I think that, you know, you're constantly having to nourish your center of excellence and your data, you know, your data talent pool with new people, and then, of course, new expertise, and that is done with upskilling. And then the last one I would say is not to forget diversity and inclusion, that, you know, by having a diverse team, you are collectively more intelligent and able to solve more complex problems.
Yeah, I think you've actually mentioned, this has come up a couple times, that there's still people involved in an AI COE. There's still this cross section of technology and humans to enable it. And I think that's something that's often missed, is that that itself is going to need people. It's a very big tree you've planted, and it takes a lot of water, so to speak, from a metaphoric standpoint. Pedro, maybe give an example of on the use case side of maybe, you know, a really, like, this is what it started off, and this is why we did it this way, and then what messaging you did around trimming a use case back to get to a convertible, you know, product ready fit. So maybe give an example of how you've seen this in action.
Yeah, maybe just to take a recent example of a piece of work we've done where, again, we were talking about sentiment analysis with information outside in the web. So taking articles of the web and trying to understand, what do some of these investors think about the company? What is their key concerns? And then with that as well, be able to move forward with an understanding of, let's say, what we can actually do with information. We started very small by actually just starting with a very small subset of our investors, you know, a solution which was actually giving us just first answers to what we were actually seeking to do. So this solution, which I'm just talking about, gave us a first perspective of the potential we could use or we could get out of NLP. Out of that, we started then to scale it up. But at a certain point, the question came back, as you just said, can you do more, right? Can you actually go outside of the domain? Can you build in additional features which have maybe nothing to do with what we were intentionally doing with the use case first, right? So we had actually to bring back people into the thinking that this MVP, which we were doing, so that first product set, was actually giving us benefits, but we wouldn't be now taking this to a step where we will be adding too many things unless they give us additional value, right? So really having that conversation with your stakeholders about the value you add at every iteration is going to be super important, right?
Absolutely. And Albert, give me a perspective, because you know Pedro's focused pharma, Maya's focused on industry as well, and even Lee. But you're potentially trying to give framework in AI COE for government and business in one shot. Maybe talk about how those roles are slightly different, or how a COE in your world has to evolve based on the potential consumer of what you're producing.
Yeah, well, I really like something Lee said about celebrating the lessons. I'm not quite sure we're quite there yet to the full razzmatazz, but I think that's a really great point. And I suppose the way that that I think about that we do that is that we're able to gather together the knowledge about what works and what doesn't across many use cases across the whole of the public sector, and synthesize that. And So not only can we help to take that forward into other projects, but it also enables us to understand where there are common challenges that business and machine learning data teams are facing across the public sector, right? So that then puts us in a position where we do this, we can think about, well, what infrastructure or support do we need to put in place that is horizontal and cuts across sectors and is actually going to enable them to address some of those common challenges that maybe, you know, data teams, business teams aren't always set up really effectively, you know, to address. So a good example of that is work we've done to build a more systematic way to engage the public around the accountability of algorithms and provide greater algorithmic transparency, and to do that throughout project life cycles, or some of the work we do around providing learning resources for, you know, people across an organization, from leaders through to workforce, so that people understand how you know, risks around automation bias and how to actually use some of these models in practice. So we think very much about that sort of horizontal enablement layer and bringing the knowledge and lessons through from all the use cases that we see.
Fantastic. And, you know, we have about 5 minutes left or so. And maybe, Lee, let's go to you and let's do like a quick round, about 90 seconds each. There's a massive cultural shift that's going to happen in an organization when the word AI is going to be in play, and when you set up a COE around it. Maybe give a, you know, I like the one takeaway that you can leave. What's the one soundbite? Hopefully no one steals the person ahead of them. But what's the one soundbite in a cultural shift that you want to leave the audience with, that they should be aware of? What's the number one cultural shift to consider?
Well, cultural shift, or probably one of my most profound learnings. I'm going to go with the most profound learning, which is the mathematics are the easy parts. The math here, the stuff that occurs in those vector processing units, is the easy part. This is 95% about data, and really knowing your data. Is it learnable data? And it introduces a set of things that most people haven't talked about: data veracity, the notion of truthfulness, and how truthfulness diminishes as time evolves. These are things that are very, very different. And so I just would underscore that, and I'll build a bridge to culture, that you bring data as a part of everyone's job and make it a primary part of projects to consider data as a fuel for your AI projects in the future. But just can't understate the importance of really understanding data.
And Majella, what do you think from the perspective of, with a culture, maybe 90 days, when do you start the AI COE? Is it day one, or is it 90 days in, or 120 days in? When do you think that should be set up?
Well, I think that's a question where the answer is it depends. It depends on many things. You know, what's the analytics maturity of your organization? If you're in the really early stages, then, you know, it could be that an AI COE is just a few more years into the future. Whereas if you've got fairly advanced analytics maturity, you know, then it's time to rein in the talent and get focused about you're developing those use cases and embedding them across the business. I think that what is important when we talk about the culture, how do we set the culture and data culture inside an organization? I guess my message would be that I think we need to think about how we democratize artificial intelligence in our organizations. We've seen some great work on this in the science field with data verification. That's making data findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And I think democratizing artificial intelligence takes it a step further. So yes, you have your hub of experts, that team that in the center of excellence, but what are you doing in the broader organization to develop the data culture? And I think that you need to really think about how you're going to democratize artificial intelligence on a broader level inside an organization.
Yeah, we could do an hour on that one for sure. And one thing I'll tease that we can certainly do 2 hours on is Pedro, from the cultural shift, talk about the explainability, transparency needed to also influence that culture.
Yeah, so I think it's really important that you know, the workforce understands, you know, what does artificial intelligence actually do, and what are the solutions they're interacting with actually carrying forward in terms of data. So it's important that you create trust on, let's say, the governance approach you have and the standards to secure that you have an explainable solution which is not going to fall over but is actually going to be as well understood and can actually be fixed in order for results to be really maintained within the sphere where it actually has to deliver the results, right? So it's important that you have that dialogue with the organization ongoing. As Majella said, you have democratization of artificial intelligence really in place so that everyone's literacy increases and everyone can follow along and create that trust level, which will help you then as well to succeed with your projects, your identification of projects, your sustenance as well with the solution so that they're used, right?
Fantastic answer, and I'm blown away you did that in under 90 seconds, so that's impressive. Albert, leave us with the final thought. Who, from the cultural standpoint, should lead the AI COE? What type of person or persona?
Well, that's such an interesting question. So I guess, and I say this humbly as somebody who comes from a technical background, a technology background, it should definitely not be somebody from a technology background, right? It should be somebody who's thinking, in our case, probably about the value for citizens and the public, and making sure that that we deliver excellent public services and taking that citizen-centric view. If you're in a business, it should be about that individual who's really clear-eyed about the business value. So these are all tools to unlock those outcomes. And I go back to something that Lee said, and in our case, it's the outcomes in our national performance framework that are making it makes Scotland an even better place to live. But in business, it's that bottom line or those business drivers. But yeah, business leaders. People who have a citizen focus in the public service.
That's a fantastic perspective that I think a lot of people would think that it's your chief data scientist or your technologist. Thank you so much. I mean, so many more questions we could have about measurability and how do you measure success and failure and all that. But we are out of our time, and I really thank everyone for their participation and I do mean the average IQ of this group is pretty high, so I'm sorry I've lowered it. But, thank you so much for joining, and back to you guys on the main floor. And have a wonderful rest of your conference today.
To all of you, it was really great, and I know exactly how fast these 30 minutes just go by. There is a lot more to discuss, and I must say, listening to you guys and also reflecting the 5 last years, all the discussion all around the AI, and one of the most important takeaways is really it is about the human being. It is about us. It's about how we cope with it. It's technology should support us and not vice versa. So yeah, I think the whole discussion about democratizing AI will be definitely one of our next topics to look at it. So with that, I can just only motivate the audience to reach out to the speakers on social media, keep connecting and exchanging such an important topic within the companies, within teams, within boards. So thanks a lot, Majella, Lee, Albert, Pedro, and Thomas. Once again, huge applause for this great panel and insights. And let's talk soon again. So now we're coming to our second keynote. Dear audience, welcome to the transition point, learning to thrive in disruptive times. We tend to get lost in space and time without realizing that where we were today is actually part of a much longer and much bigger story. For this topic, I invite and welcome Steyn to our stage, joining us from England. Steyn, welcome. You are an award-winning speaker on transformation and disruptive technologies and author of Transition Point, From Steam to the Singularity.
You have
over 25 years of experience in supply chain and technology, working across multiple industries verticals. You are also a visiting fellow at Cranfield University and a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport. You are currently working with Area Technology in Silicon Valley AI company, focusing on decision intelligence and developing the self-driving, self-learning cognitive supply chain. Steyn, the virtual stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Lily. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world. It's a great pleasure to be here today at the Swiss Cognitive event. I'm joining you, as the headline says, from the middle of the UK, which is a very dull and rainy day out there at this moment in time. What I'd like to do, I've been asked to do a bit of a general overview, a bit of a macro overview, using some of the topics that I wrote about in my book, Transition Point, which came out a few years ago. And I'm obviously trying to relay that back and link that back at the end towards the topic of the day, which is, of course, the Artificial Intelligence Centre of Excellence. You can see we're talking about being able to thrive in an age of disruption, very disruptive time at the moment. Now, you've probably heard this term called VUCA. I first heard about 2009 at a Gartner event. Stands for, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, and it was used to describe the post-financial crash time. And I've heard that term now being used by consultancies and by leaders for the last decade or so. And one of the things that really intrigued me was, we're constantly using it to describe what's happening, but no one's ever really describing why. And that was the real question that actually fascinated me, is why is it so disruptive right now? It didn't seem so disruptive in the 1980s when I started work, and going through the 1990s, it seemed relatively stable. And the answer to that question was really, I didn't know, and I wanted to know. So I took a large amount of research to undertake my book. And one of the things that we came up against is the importance of actually knowing why is critical. And it's something I'll keep coming back to, I think. Because you can't control what you don't understand, and it's very difficult to improve things that you are unable to control. So Clayton Christensen, the late Clayton Christensen, professor from Harvard who focused on innovation, said, the theory of disruption is critical for leaders to understand, because if they don't understand it, then the only way they can act is when there's data to convince them. But of course, data is only available about something that's already happened, so you can't take action until that's over. So why is it so disruptive right now? Let's understand the theory of disruption. And I have to go back. My research took me back to Soviet Russia, to a gentleman called Nikolai Kondryab, and then on into Austria, another gentleman called Joseph Schumpeter, who picked up Kondryab's work to try and explain the whole nature of progress, and find that, because capitalist-driven progress is not linear but cyclical. It's driven by two factors: the entrepreneur and the innovations that the entrepreneurs generate. And what happens is that creates a major upswing in technological innovation, which then matures, and then money moves from focusing on these new opportunities to moving to things like other financial products, such as subprime mortgages, for example. And then focus moves towards efficiencies and exploitations. And we've come out of a winter period here, and you can see that we had what was called an AI winter, where there was lots of work in research labs being done on artificial intelligence, but not many people were interested. There was no investment making its way towards that research, so it stayed very much in the laboratories of academic institutions and didn't make its way out into the wider world. Now, Christensen identified sort of three primary types of innovations, and I will come back to this. The general one is your sustaining innovation, so the things that are performance improvement or incremental innovations to existing products or existing services. Then we move into sort of efficiency innovations, which is ways to make and sell established products. And then ultimately disruptive innovations, things that create a whole new market or a whole new customer type, usually by utilizing either a new form of power, a new form of communications, or a new form of transportations, or more likely a combination of those three coming together. And you can see, if we look back to the Industrial Revolution up until the sort of current day, that we've been through 5 of these waves. And you can see that each one of these has these new power sources, transport mechanisms, and communication mechanisms, which just spawn a whole host of new industries. And what we can also see is these waves are getting stronger, then faster and higher. They're getting more disruptive. The frequency between them is shortening, the impact is increasing, the rate at which they diffuse is increasing, because initially, they traveled the world on sailboat, now they travel the world on sort of fiber and, internet speed technologies. And also the scope. The first industrial revolution involved Britain, the second one involved the US and Japan and Germany, as well as the UK. And now, of course, the entire world's involved, which means we have significantly more brain power looking at these innovations. So in fact, they really look more like this than by very nice, even sort of cyclical waves. But we're now in the upswing period. So we've come out of this AI winter, and we're now into this whole period where, money investment is making its way back into innovation, because that's where the exciting stuff's happening. So we've gone into a new sort of AI spring, but it's also the most disruptive period. Kondryab, back at the turn of the century, when he was doing his research initially, identified this is when all of the major, social upgrades actually happened. And the reason is we're going through a time of power shifts and paradigm shifts, because we've still got the old ways of doing things. We've got big demand right now for things like human drivers, while exactly at the same time we're using artificial intelligence and advanced robotics and those sorts of things to come together to create trucks that will ultimately drive themselves. And of course, the trucks that drive themselves will ultimately take the jobs of the people who drive trucks. And this time is a time of huge disruption, and we're seeing that right now. You can see all of these different headlines going on, a massive supply chain disruption around the world. Obviously things going on with like Ukraine at this moment in time, but we just seem to be in a world of ever-changing, chaotic disruption. Now, one of the big impacts is that the organizations that built these supply chains, built them in the time of the downswing and the fifth wave, where most of the focus was on efficiency, as we saw. So they focused on offshoring, on outsourcing, on the general leaning of the supply chains, but that's now made them really exposed to all of these disruptions. And many companies have now really found out what the true cost of low cost is. And the other thing that takes place at this point, as I mentioned earlier, is this is a time of great danger because of all the social unrest, because of all the power shifts, because of all the threats to the existing hegemons. This is a time when we see all the social unrest. So here's two images, obviously, of Paris. It started the very first wave in the Industrial Revolution, went over to the French Revolution until the recent upswing where we saw the yellow vest protests. We've seen these sort of social unrests, and of course, right now we're seeing what's going on in places like Ukraine. Now, the interesting thing is, because we've seen it for the first time, we tend to think this is all new and completely, unique. The reality, of course, is just because the chaos is new to us doesn't mean it's new to everyone. It's just this stage of the process. And in fact, if we go back to the last wave, you can very quickly see how, we had exactly this level of sort of disruption. The only difference this time is the sort of globalization process that took place in the fifth wave has made these supply chains and all the impacts of this disruption much more global, much more interconnected, and a lot less local. But we saw everything from Vietnam War to the Cold War to the Cuban Missile Crisis to Watergate to the Iranian hostage situation, the civil rights movement, the equal rights movement, the winter of discontent, the 3-day week. All of these things took place at kind of this stage of the fifth wave in the late 60s. Early 1970s. Now, the thing that's going to surprise most people is we're not through this disruptive period. We're actually getting started. And this is being driven, as I said earlier, by innovations, by technology. And most of the technologies that have been worked on for the last decade have been behind the scenes. They're relatively deceptive, but they're about to break cover. In fact, in many cases, they are breaking cover, and they're going to rapidly become very disruptive. And I particularly like Roy Amara's quote, who basically said, we tend to overestimate the effect of technology in the short term, but underestimate the effect in the long run. And of course, what we've just seen with the pandemic is effectively a sort of rocket fuel being applied to this automation revolution. It's moved things forwards greatly, and it's taken some of the laggards in society. For example, people like my parents, for example, who would not have, moved towards e-commerce or, contactless payment, these sorts of technologies. Well, they were given no choice. And they had to. So what it's actually done is accelerated, certainly in the sort of the digital side of the revolution in terms of things like e-commerce and retail. That's been, incredibly shortened in terms of time frame. And it's creating what I call, I have written about in my book, the 6-wave automation triple whammy. What we're seeing is, technology that is replacing human hands, the replacement of all the things we do with things on the end of our wrists, including things like picking very fragile fruits out of the field, things that we thought were never going to be automated. So the things that we're talking about right now in terms of artificial intelligence, now this has a lot of people spooked, obviously, because we've never seen this before. We've never really seen the automation of knowledge-based tasks or the automation of cerebral activities, all the way through into the convergence of these technologies together, where effectively we're using machine brains to drive machine hands and create the automation of effectively the end-to-end enterprise. And the real kicker is, of course, all of this is happening at exactly the same time. And the end result of that is what I call the PAL supply chain. We're going to end up with, in businesses that are incredibly, providing services that are incredibly personalized, automated end-to-end through manufacturing, delivery, and planning. And what we're seeing now is, something that I've been predicting for a long time, enormous localization, reshoring and nearshoring, and moving things away from countries that have a lot of disruption, and actually being able to be in the sphere of control, but using automation to reduce the cost of manufacturing. But the end result of that is actually a positive. It's creating, the shorter the supply chain, the stronger the supply chain, but it also makes it more agile. But most importantly, I think right now, it makes it more sustainable. We're going to start making only what we need when we need it, rather than making huge quantities and shipping it, halfway around the world. People like Kathy Wood, the CEO of ARK Investment, it's really highlighting artificial intelligence impact every line of the income statement, and that any business leader who's not trying to figure out how it applies to their P&L line is going to be in competitive trouble. There's really seeing artificial intelligence, as being the next great step forward for most organizations, and it's moving faster than most people think. Now, of course, that's, AI, it's all been driven by Moore's law, and I don't need to explain to you what Moore's law is. And Moore's law is obviously operated at an exponential level, doubled every time. What they're finding out in terms of things like, quantum development, someone like Harmat Nevin, for example, who heads up Google's Quantum Development Center, and hence the term Nevin's law, is that quantum computing is expanding at a double exponential rate, which looks a little bit like this. And because there's a race going on right now in order to be first. Google originally were Sycamore quantum chip, laid claim to quantum supremacy. Then Amazon did it. Now, China is basically saying it now has the most powerful quantum computer. So there's an exponential increase in capability, but also an exponential increase in the amount of money and research taken to move this forward as well. And this is moving us towards a new era of machines, where we've gone through these waves, and we've gone from, very mechanical production facilities to ones where we're currently in this sort of cognitive revolution, where we're looking at, very specific or narrow AI, machine and deep learning. But ultimately, we're going to move towards, from 2030 beyond, so much more quantum-powered AI. The challenge, of course, is, can we keep up to this? As data inputs increase exponentially, machine brain power improves exponentially, our human cognitive capability remains relatively static. I work in the field of decision intelligence, and one of the things I like about it is that it provides glass boxes, because I know how important it is for the human to understand what the numbers that the machine generates. Why did it come up with that particular number? Where did you get it from? Can I understand and follow the logic? But as the world becomes ever more complex, we will soon find out that, we will defer to more black box systems, because we simply wouldn't understand it if it explained itself, because it uses so many variables. So we're in this world really where we're saying, machines will soon be as smart as people. But as this comedian Ginny Hogan says, yeah, it really kind of depends on which people you're talking about here. But we're going to see a cultural lag, and this is what is hitting most organizations. Whilst technology is increasing at an exponential rate, or even a double exponential rate in terms of things like quantum computing, we simply don't. Our organizations and our people change as a linear rate. But we're seeing that transition. So I'm a transitional person. Most people in the audience, I guess, will be. We remember the analog age, and we're now trying to adapt to the digital age. But if, like this young Chinese girl, who's buying something here using, 2D barcode on her smartwatch, she's not having to unlearn the way to buy goods in order to learn this new way. It's just the way she buys goods. So she's born into this technology. So the learning cycle is completely condensed. The trouble is, these people aren't running companies. People who run companies are people my age, sort of Gen X business leaders, and we were trained to handle change in the downswing, not the upswing. Our focus was on controlling things, not disrupting. But in the downswing, the rate of change is linear. The environment is controlled and stable. This has affected the culture they developed and the things that they measured, and also the skills and behaviors that were valued. But in the upswing, the rate of change is exponential. The environment is chaotic and ever-changing. The measures, the skills, and the culture all need to change to adapt to this new environment. And leaders are struggling to control their business in a world that basically no longer aligns to what they were taught when they did their MBAs. And when we go back to innovations, we've seen that, of course, the sustaining and efficiency innovation focus is what we're really focusing on the downswing, whereas now it's all about disruptive innovations. And we're seeing that there's a gap between the nature of the decisions that we need to make and our capability to make those decisions. So most businesses at the moment are stuck within this sort of disruption zone, where they're needing to make ever more faster, more accurate, more granular decisions, and they can't. They simply aren't able to at this moment. So they need tools like decision intelligence, like artificial intelligence, to help them. because it's almost impossible for humans to react to the speed of change. We can't handle the velocity, the volume, the variety and volatility of data that hits their business every day. We can't make decisions at the speed and accuracy needed. Too much knowledge is trapped in the heads of individuals and not being documented. The data used to make these decisions is not at the right level, not at the right frequency, or at the right granularity for today's 24/7 real-time world. And when we try to solve mission critical problems, it means we need to access multiple systems and multiple spreadsheets trying to diagnose and fix them. The number of SKUs and the network complexity means that things like people like planners can only focus on a few key products. And when they do plan, they focus on past history, on averages and at aggregate family level, which makes the plans too inaccurate to be useful. And what we're seeing, Gartner sort of was identifying this as well, is that the decisions now are more complex, more connected, more context specific and more continuous. And I'll defer to this chart on the left there. So even when we have all this data, so even when we use artificial intelligence and data analytics to provide all this data, most of the time we use it to reinforce a decision based on our own gut feelings. We cherry pick data to make the case. Decision making is still only somewhat or really data driven. And most of our decisions are based on what we already believe to be true, rather than looking at data to challenge those beliefs. And we're finding that it's not good enough to just visualize this data. Companies are being overwhelmed by the amount of information that's actually hitting them. Doesn't matter how clever the algorithms behind it. If the value is hidden in the volume, the result is ended up with confusion, not action. Which means that most of these beautiful data lakes that we envisage for our organizations are actually very quickly turning into data swamps, because without a clear understanding and focus on the outcomes that we actually want to achieve, and just pointing data scientists at all this data, we quickly find out that we become data and initiative rich. We're kicking off projects, but we're always on the back foot. We're always insights and results poor, and there's never really changing our performance. Now, what can we do about that? Well, what we do about that is to think differently. We are seeing that so much money is being poured at digital transformation for so little results right now. Doing a digital project does not make you a digital business. Gartner, for example, identified that 60% of the companies right now have plans to invest in things like intelligent automation, but they also recognize that the same number of people are not prepared for this adoption. The challenge is, most businesses are not trying to digitally transform, they're simply digitizing their current business. The most two common approaches to digital transformation are either replicating what we already do or trying to imitate what other companies do elsewhere. There's no real innovative thinking here. And without a clear focus on how it can deliver value to the customer, all of this digital technology sounds unicorns and rainbows, but then very quickly we end up seeing that we're required to do a lot of the work here, but ultimately ends up a little bit feeling a bit of an ass, sort of with the culture of the organization and our structures weighing down and stopping any real forward progress. The challenge here is that we really need to change mindsets as much before we can actually take value of all of these new machines and these new algorithms. The problem with transformation is not the lack of ideas, it's a lack of a change in behavior, analog mindsets in a digital world. These successful digital transformations are not actually about technology, it's more about transforming the mindset, the culture, and the strategy of the organization, because the what and how of technology really only makes sense when it's applied to a compelling why. See, these digital things should not be seen as a project. This is a journey, not a destination. It should be seen as the beginning of a paradigm shift in an organization's mindset, an opportunity to redefine what it stands for, how it operates, and what it rewards. So all of this new hardware and new software requires new wave thoughtware. This disruptive times requires a lot of disruptive thinking. We need to actually start to really think about new paradigms and not just about continuous improvements to old ways of working, which means we need to become much more customer centric. We need to have a Copernican business revolution that stops us thinking about the firm being at the center of our universe and actually start to think about the customer being the center, and then how we circle and deliver value to them. We need to help companies not to see artificial intelligence as a threat to existing jobs. That's very much a fifth wave mindset. These technologies will disrupt roles. Of course they will. 1 second, please. But, we end up ensuring that the demise of the role, if we don't resist this, not just the whole company. We really need to have some digital skins with the digital ways. The old jobs are going to be driven by machines, but new jobs, more human jobs, are going to be available. In the past, your experience and work determined your worth, but moving forward, your ability to ask the right questions and use a mix of data, imagination, and creativity to deliver new solutions will determine your value. And companies are seeing this. So Wendy Herrick, the head of digital supply chain Unilever, said, we had to move from knowing it all to learning it all. And that's now one of their mantras. We need to open our minds to what's possible and what's out there. See, things will never again be as slow as they are right now. And the best way to protect the future, as Alan Kay once said, the best way to protect the future is to create it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sheen, for all these insights. And I know we could have gone on and on and on. It's really, really interesting. Dear audience, we got quite some questions. Please reach out directly to Sheen. He will be more than happy to answer that. Unfortunately, we don't have time to take it all together here. So thanks a lot for your great inputs, and I'll be more than happy to go on with the discussion later on.
Thank you.
Now, I would just like to point out on some of the things that I really loved in the last few presentations, and especially also how Sheen brought this in. And the ones who started with us from the beginning remember what I said about my grandma, who became almost 102 years old, and that we can learn so much about this generation. I mean, you mentioned some things about, the global disruption, the global waves how do you say now? I just lost my what I wanted to say. Sorry. So it's really about, what goes on global, what goes on local. And in the past, we sometimes just didn't know. And a lot of things that the older generation went through, we can learn so much from them. And you also mentioned about the new generation, the young generation. They just grew up with a lot of things that for them is a commodity and for us not. So we are the ones who need to unlearn, to be open for new things. And therefore, we can also learn a lot from the young generation. So saying that, I would like to do the intro to our next panels. My dear audience, now we are taking into the next level and go beyond data technology, but still within the context of AI Center of Excellence, of course. I invite now to the stage our next panel leader and panelists focusing on AI Center of Excellence from a little bit of a different perspective. They will go more into the aspects of people, skills, talent, the collaboration between domains and leadership. To wade into this topic, I invite Natascha, Andreas, Raul, Johan, and Andeed to our stage. Natascha in Nairobi, Kenya. Let me introduce you first to the audience. Natascha, you are a transformative and dynamic leader within the data science and AI space who is well immersed across various industries. You co-founded the AI Center of Excellence that aims to build sustainable value for AI by building capacity, building demand, and building AI solutions through the center. A warm welcome to you. Also a warm welcome to Andeed. A very good evening to you in Singapore. Great to have you with us. You have been a cloud business and risk manager leader for more than 14 years in major technology companies such as ServiceNow, Ivanti, and ByteDance. You are also a lecturer at the Singapore University of Social Science, teaching hyper-automation and AI. You strongly believe that cognitive technologies are here to enrich our lives, not to replace. And that is human who needs to manage the way we think, so what we can manage the way we use. With you on stage, we have Johan. Huge thank you to you too. You're joining us actually from South Africa. We are sending a warm greetings also to our great friend Jed Ludik, who I guess is also listening to us from South Africa. So Johan, you are an AI intelligence and automation leader and speak globally at conferences on the fourth industrial revolution and emerging technologies. You were awarded Best AI and Robotic Management Consult by Wealth and Finance magazine in 2019. And are a published author who regularly contributes articles and thought leadership to well-known publications. You are also a research fellow at the School of Data Science and Computational Thinking at Stellenbosch University and an adjunct professor at the School of Business at Wageningen University. Johan, one more note before I jump into the next intro. We want really to thank you for contributing up with some incredible people such as Emma, Raul, and Sheen, who also became part of our today's conference agenda. Thanks a lot for supporting us. With that, also, dear audience, if you know about great people who can share their experience, don't hesitate to reach out to us too. Now, Raul, to your kind and humble request, let me introduce you very short and crisp. Raul, you are the Vice President of Wageningen University. You're a social and data scientist turned academician with a focused dedication towards building new age higher education through technology. Raul, please allow me to add a few more interesting facts about you. You hold a PhD in AI and robotic process automation application in human resources. You are a registered expert in AI, intelligent systems, and multi-agent system and the European Commission, a nominee for the Forbes 30 Under 30 Europe 2020 list, and awarded in the Europe Indian 40 Under 40 leader. Raul, congratulations and welcome. Great to have you with us today. Then we have Andreas. Andreas, you define the commercial and GTM strategy for AI at SAP. You have been a trusted advisor to C-level executives, senior management, and domain experts across lines of business and industries with more than 80 innovation projects. Through the past 20 years in the software industry, you have held several roles spanning product and solution management, corporate strategy and M&A, board of staff, new business incubation, and IT project management. You hold an MBA from Europäische Fernhochschule Hamburg and a bachelor degrees in computer science from Hilmer Büchner Hochschule in Germany. You share your experience on setting up and scaling AI and automation initiatives via your intelligence briefing series on LinkedIn. And today, here as an expert on our stage. Thank you for joining us, Andreas. Please take the virtual stage now and see you in 30 minutes.
Perfect. Thank you so much and welcome everybody. I'm really excited to be hosting this panel together with so many esteemed panelists here. Looking at the term Center of Excellence, I certainly have an interpretation of what it is in general, in, for example, how we use it at SAP for our development, support, and IT teams, and what their missions are to bring more awareness, more expertise, and more guidance to the AI process. But I think also beyond a COE as being an expert team in a business, it can also be much, much broader, like experience concentrated in an academic or economic area. And so I think with the diverse backgrounds on our panel today, again, I'm really excited to learn about Natascha's, Raul's, Johan's, and Andeed's perspective. So I would say let's get started maybe with a very fundamental question. Andeed, what do you say? Why is this Center of Excellence so essential and so key for AI?
Well, I guess, the Center of Excellence has always been a powerful strategy in bringing leaderships and expertise from different disciplines throughout the organization, right? Really, regardless of location and businesses, to do one thing, right? To really define and develop standards and best practices. And we are seeing a lot of this going on. And today we are talking about our focus area, which is AI. And I personally also have helped one of the charity organization in UK, known as For Humanities, where they form a COE to examine and analyze downsides of risk associated with worldwide advancement of AI and automation. And the team is really developing a standards and best practices, right, to engage in risk mitigation and ensure the optimal outcome via AI auditing. So something very new in the market where we talk about auditing AI, because we want to maintain something what we call an infrastructure of trust, right? And this trust includes things like bias, ethics, privacy, cybersecurity for organizations that are currently building their AI applications. So I guess COE really has a very strong track record in the space of IT and operations. And I feel that this is really essential in AI as we are moving out of the second winter and into what I call a sustainable AI for the future. So I hope that answers your question, Andreas.
Perfect. I think that sums it up very nicely and gives a very good introduction. And with that, or building on that, I think many in the audience might be wondering, what are some of the key considerations when you set up an AI COE? What should you be thinking about, and how should you go about that? So maybe over to Natascha. What has your experience been, and what would you recommend?
Well, I think okay. I think with setting up a center of excellence, it's important to understand what the vision for setting it up is. What are your goals? And then that will drive the strategy in which you would use to drive that center. And the main goal for a center, I would say, for a lot of organizations is to accelerate, as has been said by one of the speakers, to drive adoption, to improve or optimize the return on investment, and to identify the opportunities that are available to the company, to the organization, or to whoever it is that's setting up the center. So things I think would be ideally key considerations would be, like I said, the strategy, but also it's important to have the right people, because the people are who puts in the work. And I think we'll touch on what that looks like in terms of the team for center a bit later. And then ideally also, it would be great to have a structure that allows for these people to be able to create and to innovate within that center. And then there's key aspects of process and technology that allow for us building a structure that allows them to interact and to have key outcomes that are attainable. So I would say those are the key considerations in regards to setting up a center.
Perfect. I think you touched on an excellent point, right? Thinking about first, what is my strategy? Why am I doing this anyways in the first place? But also what you mentioned around the people aspect. I can imagine, when we talk about AI Center of Excellence, there's a natural gravitation to say AI, data science, these types of engineering science associated roles. But is it really true? I mean, maybe Raul, from what you are seeing in academia and maybe beyond, is it really just data science and AI type skill sets that you need to have on the COE?
Well, that's a pretty valid question if you look at it, because there is normally a misconception worldwide, which is artificial intelligence or machine learning comes mainly from the programming side, which is the computer science side. Fortunately or unfortunately, the origins are actually from the philosophy and psychological viewpoint. That is why it's called learning. That is why it's called intelligence. That is why there is something named as reinforcement learning, which is a typical 1950s psychological experiment. So everything originates from there. So obviously a center of excellence should, by default, have professionals primarily in the field of psychology and philosophy to know how to apply the technology in the real world. And obviously, you need to have the computer science or the science background too. So it's not either or, it is both of them. And this is pretty visible in academia, where AI is towards engineering. We're actually now, at least at our university, we are orienting it even in the business school for that matter, or even in the social sciences or humanities school, incorporating that field. So it's quite critical to have a center of excellence which is interdisciplinary.
Excellent. I think that's a fantastic feedback or fantastic summary, right? It's especially not just the data science, and it's great to see that much more of that is being taught and is making its way into the curriculum. But maybe switching back again to business, maybe a question for you, Johan. How are you seeing this play out in business today? are we there yet that people already understand what is AI? What does it take to succeed? How trivial or how complex is it to get AI off the ground, even if you do have a COE? What are you seeing?
Andreas, firstly, I'm daunted by your Hollywood-like studio background. It looks very good with my plain background, but yeah, it looks great. Okay, so in my experience as a management consultant, I think you know, a lot of people have a KPI, a key performance indicator, to start using AI in their division or their business unit or something like that. And in the last, I would say, 5 years, about 90% of the consulting I've done to fix business problems did not include AI. It's basic process automation, people not understanding their roles and responsibilities. I often say you can't automate stupidity, tongue in cheek. I mean, AI is incredible. It can really help businesses, but it is so more often than not the answer to the business problems that businesses are struggling with. And I always try, and when I speak to senior business leaders, just step them back and say, forget AI and machine learning and robotic process automation and IoT and all those things. What are you trying to fix? And so that's the problem. I think a lot of people go to conferences, read the Gartner and Forrester reports, and we as practitioners in this field really owe it to our customers to educate them. What is the problem? And secondly, what is the technology? I hope that answers your question, Andreas.
Yeah, I think great to hear what you're seeing in the industry and working with your customers. So would you say leaders already have a good understanding of it, or what would it take for them to get an even better understanding of the different technologies, maybe what they can do, and again, how to set it up in an organization?
It's such an important question. My experience is most business leaders, especially in big corporates like banks and telcos, don't understand this technology at all, because it's often been the domain of the IT department or the chief information technology or technology officer somewhere in a little corner. But this technology is influencing everything we do across the business. So it really is and should be a C-suite imperative. Of course, people don't have to become algorithm experts or AI experts or quants or anything like that, but business decision makers should know enough about this technology. When the technologists come to them with a new initiative, they understand the impact on the organization, on the people, on the organizational structure, on how we interact with customers. So, and what I find is that there's quite a big need for executive education in this field. Again, not the techie stuff, the societal and the business impact. So to answer your question, Andreas, my experience and the statistics I've been reading from global research, about 80% of business leaders still do not understand this technology. And that is a big problem. And that's maybe one of the single biggest reasons why these initiatives fail, in my opinion.
Again, thanks for sharing. Right, it just points out that there's such a huge need to drive that awareness, to drive that enablement, and to your point, not just from a technology or IT function, but really to look at that holistically, what you can do and what you can use it for. So maybe, you know, switching back again for a different perspective, contrasting business with education. Maybe a question for you, Raul. What are you seeing there in education? Where or how a COE can provide value in higher education, especially, you know, going back to your point of this not being just an engineering domain or focus, but really social science and being much broader. So what elements do you see are relevant in higher education?
All right, I'll answer this question with two main key points. Number one is in a center of excellence, if you are to do it with a university or a higher education institution, there should be a cohort partnership between the organization from the industry and of course, the university. Normally, the university will provide the facilities and the industry will provide the professionals. And this will supply students with that hands-on industry experience with the need, which normally, fortunately or unfortunately, universities cannot cope at the same speed because there are government regulations in the picture. So that center of excellence will give live training. That is first thing. Number two is we do have internally, trying speaking from experience, we do have an AI and robotics automation center of excellence with a partner university in Croatia. So we do develop joint projects with Eastern European and Central European nations. And we do avail the best of government requirements or government projects in India, as well as in the EU, and develop joint projects for the Mota. So we don't do it from the academician's viewpoint. We don't involve professors as much as students. We involve engineering as well as social sciences or even business school students to do the projects, run them entirely, and deal with the nitty-gritties of what it looks like. So we will offer them that experience that they actually need and a broader understanding of AI, which, as I mentioned earlier, and as Johan also mentioned, is quite misunderstood. And I agree with Johan, it gives the scope for executive education also, which is quite important. I agree completely on that.
So I think what I'm hearing you say is it's not just a matter of skill sets and whether it's social science or engineering. Of course, we need both here, but then it's also not just a matter of research and industry or practice, but bringing them together as well to make it meaningful and to make it relevant and applicable. Is that a good summary?
Yeah, looks like it. Yeah.
So maybe staying on that part of research. I know, Natascha, that's an area where you're very active as well. Maybe focusing a little bit more on that research part. What do you see there? What's the value that research can bring in a scenario or in an engagement collaboration like this?
Well, I think first of all, the AI space is continually growing, and that means that there's a lot of contributions going into the space a lot often. So that means that even within specific industries, there's people who are doing a lot more than what you would have privy to. So I think research becomes extremely important because it allows you to move outside the confines of what you know and to explore what has been done and to understand what the gaps are. And I think, interestingly, there's study that was showing that the AI research has grown by 600% from 2000 to 2019. So that means that the contribution into the field is quite large. And in summary, I think impactful research remains a key ingredient for setting up, for building, and for accelerating AI within a center. And it allows for people to explore a lot more opportunities within the space.
Fantastic. And, obviously a lot of the basis technology has originated in research, and that's where a lot of the breakthroughs and meaningful things are being developed that are then put in practice. So, I'm wondering just how do you see these cognitive technologies and things playing out in the future? Maybe a question for Andeed. Where do you see this go?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. So I think, I have a long answer for this, but I really want to make it a lot more animative. I don't have numbers. So I'd like to invite everyone to imagine this with me. Right? I mean, the future of cognitive technologies will involve more than just the physical form of us and what we can actually see now in research generated by humanities. Right? So we get a bit uncomfortable here at this point, right? Because you can see in the future, we may involve research that are deriving from the cognitive side of machines or technology that we use. And how about a virtual part of us continue to live in what we call a twin world, right? Where we may no longer be living anymore in the physical world. So this avatar of ours continues to learn, to work, to play, to earn, maybe even getting old. So that's an image that I had, really, whether is it going to be in my lifetime, I'm not too sure, right? But this is why we need to start putting in efforts and expertise together to work on how that world might look like and begin to build this infrastructure of trust, right? The construction of COE is really for the future rather than for now, but we have to begin now, right? So I think the future may need to be progressively built, right? Where we may see connective technologies living closer to us. So let me give you an example. A Tesla car may know what music I like due to the change in my brain frequency, scheduling meetings based on not just my availability, but perhaps my mental state of mind at the present moment as a human, right? Or even automating the kitchen at home, which has a robotic arm to cook up a nice meal while I'm driving home that meets the dietary needs and mental needs on the day, right? So you can see this is something that I could envision what would come, right? And these are technologies that actually pretty much are in place. It's about how we actually string them up and build an infrastructure of trust. And I also see large corporates, right, including your company, my company, right? We will decentralize ourselves to be part of the humans and even changing our business model to capture this new emerging trend, which allows them to monetize in the twin world that I mentioned, and that us, the humanity, will have the control back on how we can use our data or how our data could be used. So of course, I've been covering a lot of beautiful stories here, but there's always the evil side of humanities, and we're all aware that there's no data set in this world that is completely unbiased, right? We also have seen recent times, there are companies that use automated employment decision tools, right? And those could actually exclude strong candidates to be considered, or even creditworthiness checks that could deny creditworthy individuals an opportunity to get funds for their financial needs. So to sum up, right, Andreas, this is why I feel the mission of AI auditing is such a crucial activity in the future, right? Designing the AI system to report on the confidence of the prediction, for example, or even have explainable features that could focus on the technology. And I believe the research that we all have discussed so far will work towards that. So I hope, yeah, it's a long future. Well, I'm not painted everything, but more to debate on, definitely.
Fantastic, thanks. Hey, I mean, it sure sounds really exciting, right? It's especially something, you know, now with our new favorite buzzword, the metaverse, and everything that entails, right? But this vision of the future where a lot of things are done for us or make our life a lot easier, and certainly that aspect of living on, I think is really pushing the boundaries there, and you know, making sure that what we build today and especially into the future is trusted and has that that component of human agency still in it, so I can decide whether or to what extent I want certain things to happen. So maybe back to you, Natascha, when you see and hear these things, whether it's vision or things that are happening today, how can people partner best to set up their COE to get that collaboration, that dialogue going? What's happening, what can happen in their business, for their business? With whom should they talk, or with whom should they partner?
Well, I think in terms of collaboration, it depends highly on the business and what the business wants to achieve. So maybe I can speak on our experience at the AI Center of Excellence Africa. And because for us, our model is a bit different. It's not specifically tied to a business. Ours is, our main goal is to accelerate innovation for AI within Africa. So that means that we've had to collaborate with a larger scope of people or stakeholders. And so within our collaborations, we've worked with startups, because that helps us understand how to set up, how to prepare for the use of AI from a very early stage, and what would be needed for them to achieve this. We've also had to work with technology providers and people who have been in this space for a longer time. They are able to at least give more guidance and more practical experience into what their journey has been like. We've also collaborated with different development partners, governments, that may understand what the policies look like and where they're going, and how can we begin to also take part in informing those policies. So I would say that the collaboration is highly dependent on what the center is doing. But for within centers that are developed within companies, it will be important to look at companies within the same sphere, just to see, especially those that have at least established a center of excellence, to see what they have done and how the same structure or strategy can be implemented or made better within your own organization. But I think collaboration is valuable, highly valuable, because you're able to share best practices, you're able to upskill your internal team, you're able to assess your impact, and then there's also the aspect of technology and knowledge transfer, which is highly important when working with artificial intelligence.
Fantastic. I think, again, great points, bringing in different views, different kinds of expertise as you work in that COE, as you partner. So again, building off of that, maybe a question for you, Raul. How do you see these COEs mature? Right, you put a team in place, put your experts there, they work on a bunch of projects, and then what? What's the next step? How can they evolve? How does it develop? What are you seeing?
Well, they will first fail. They will fail the first project. It will fail probably quite miserably, especially if you are dealing with academia, because academicians are known to be pretty slow in general. I mean, I know I want to include myself in the picture, but yeah, generally is the case. Fortunately, they also learn quite fast and they understand from their mistakes. So, see, the ultimate implementation of the projects has to come from a very tight coordination with the industry and understanding why we are doing it in the first place and why should it be game changing. Obviously, if you have government or public support, that enables things much more. Not talking about funds, but talking about support. That means certain approach other than monetary. So that is what gives you that edge. Obviously, if you do something which is really game-changing, then individuals will always be involved. But it's all a matter of having the right professionals on board. It's not a matter of having funds, neither a matter of having the best ideas, but the right professionals. And of course, academia has its ups and downs. I am talking from that view because, well, I originate from there, but it has certain atmosphere which industry cannot grasp and vice versa. So that has to be combined to the best equilibrium, we can say.
Fantastic. So I think we're okay, perfect. So we're coming up on time, I think, just now, with a couple of minutes left. Maybe to all of you, one after another, what's the one thing that you'd like to our audience to take away from our discussion today? What's the one thing they should really take home? Maybe let's continue with you, Raul, and then over to Natascha.
All right. I'm going to keep it pretty pragmatic, not as much as AI related per se. In my experience working with AI, either you get busy living or you get busy dying. That is how it looks, pretty much. So either you really get involved into it big time and enjoy what you're doing, or it's going to become a really big thing in life. And it's all looking for the vision, having that vision.
Fantastic, great point. Thank you. So over to Natascha.
I would say I think the adoption of AI is inevitable across industries. And I think within setting up a center of excellence, as much as the technology is important and the people are important, I would advise that people look at it more holistically, so that you're looking at both development and research and education and management, so that even as you implement in the center, every aspect of the organization understands where you're going and what the value is to your company. And I think the idea is to move as speedily as accurate as possible. So that means that you have a diverse team driving that center.
Thank you. Great point to look at it holistically. Maybe over to Johan and then to Andeed to close us out.
I wish I had hours for this one. Look, hopefully my microphone was good because outside my window there's a lot of children playing in the area that I live. My son is there. He's 8 years old. I just heard the microwave going on, which worries me greatly. So I'm going to run there after this panel discussion. But the point is, the importance of people first. The future of our children, but also the employees who work for us. Now, in a developing and a third world country like South Africa, like many others, every wage earner looks after 6 or 7 or 10 different people. So to just cut people, to have the so-called FTE reduction through automation or this kind of technology, there has to be an ethical and a philosophical consideration that people are still and will always be more important than this technology. Our children's future will be more important. And why does it have to be either or? It can be both. We can do great innovations with technology and still do a lot of good to people on Earth, especially our children. Thank you, Andreas.
Perfect. What a beautiful summary.
Thank you.
So then maybe over to Andeed.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure on me, but I like to leave with one statement and a bit of expansion. But I guess the fact that cognitive technologies exist is because humanity exists. So I hope everyone don't forget about this. And we will only get better at working with cognitive technologies. Eventually, having it embedded in us, right? Having us living with it, and eventually even continue to build us or the humanities, even when the physical form is gone, like the one that I imagined with you guys. So I really truly believe, like what Leon Dalif has introduced me on, that the way we think shapes the way we use. So let's start managing our mind, and we will see the future of cognitive technologies and humanities shaping up. That's all from me, Andreas.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So Natascha, Raul, Johan, Andeed, in summary, what I heard is, if you're passionate about AI, be really passionate about it. Look at it holistically, not just in certain silos or certain areas. There's so much scope to be covered and so much to be learned. Think people first, because it is about people in the end, for all the good that it can bring. And don't just limit yourself to today, but look further into the future of what it can achieve. So I think those were 4 very, very powerful statements and summaries. So thank you so much. It was a pleasure hosting this esteemed panel. I appreciate all your perspectives. I'm sure the audience does just the same. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot to all of you. And actually, Andreas, I couldn't do it better. You just give it spot on. And it's there were just such great insights. I can't even, think of how much more we could discuss. It's such an important thing. And especially, it is about people. And one of the things that I would like to add here, we mostly think about, if we're talking about AI, it's about tech. But it's not. It's about the human being. We need also philosophers. We need everyone, because at the end of the day, it is all about human-centric, about what is good for us. And I think this is one of the things that you guys really brought in, and I really loved also you telling us about the microwave, the sons and the kids. This is it. This is our life. We are living for that and for nothing else. And at the end of the day, if technology can give us more free time to be with our beloved ones, to have great discussions, we should implement it wherever we can. So saying that, it was great listening to all of you. Again, dear audience, reach out to those experts, get into contact. If you have any kind of further questions, Natascha, Andeed, Johan, Raul, and Andreas will be more than happy to assist. At the end of the day, we do this exchange for Share for Success, to learn from each other and to bring it to the next level at the end for the next generation. Thanks a lot for all of you to be with us today. Bye. With that, dear audience, now we dive into a topic that is sometimes taken with excitement and sometimes with skepticism. We talk about our future technologies and their impact on the future of work. It's my great pleasure to introduce you to Giselle. Giselle, you are a principal consultant on the future of work. You bring simplicity, humanity, and innovative perspective to the sometimes abstract and complex world of the future of work. You are a champion for an inclusive future of work reflected in your services across boards related to leadership in the Web3 and the metaverse, what we just heard before again too. Also in AI, data analytics, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and startup and entrepreneurial spaces. All in hopes of creating an inclusive future of work and opportunities for all. So now, the future of technology and the future of work. Giselle, it's my great pleasure to have you with us today. The virtual stage is all yours. Here we go. Great. Thanks for being with us, Giselle. The stage is yours.
It's such a pleasure. Thank you for the lovely introduction. And hello to everyone who's watching today. I have to just delve right into it and begin by saying that the future of work is ever evolving, and it's ever evolving across geographies. We know that from this global conference, across your industries and all of your organizations. Artificial intelligence, as we know it, it's really ebbing and flowing between some people feel trepidation towards the topic, some people feel that it's a hype topic, and then others find that it's quite ubiquitous. So it's kind of ingrained in our everyday processes. Today, I'd like to share with you how my take on artificial intelligence is that when it comes to the future of work, it's reimagined the present and the future of work, the workforce, and the workplace in ways that can lead, in my opinion, to what matters most to me, which is human capability, inclusion, and responsibility. So those are the three areas I want to expand upon today as we delve into what are all of these aspects about the future of work and how does AI help to reimagine. So as we go into it, I will say first, AI helps reimagine the workforce. Think about, as we've seen in Harvard Business Review cases, even just a couple of years ago, it was said that 90% of organizations expected artificial intelligence to increase their workforce capacity. So in order to be able to do this, we have seen that the pandemic and we've seen that digital transformation has really caused organizations to apply artificial intelligence in ways to increase its workforce capacity truly. Often we're seeing RPA or robotic process automation. We're seeing it within specific parameters. It can do certain things. That's nothing new. We're also seeing robots and chatbots. And we see that in organizations today, in order to augment the workforce, they're giving these capabilities even employee IDs. So it's very much part and parcel of what they consider to be the workforce. A layer of artificial intelligence that has impacted this is the concept of intelligent automation. So now we see the form of digital workers. And what that's doing is using automation and artificial intelligence to help have an asset. It could be an avatar, it could be still a chatbot, but it's all AI enabled. And what it's doing is helping to respond and learn according to the human input. In most cases, it does provide an added layer of support. So think about when you call into customer service, or when you're looking for an administrative assistant to do certain functions for you. Now with intelligent automation through these digital workers, working alongside human beings, they're learning from human beings, and they have often digital identities. So it could be a digital twin, could be photorealistic of yourself, or it could be an image of another person who is also from images of AI, which we'll talk about in just a bit. And these are real entities that are learning and being able to function on their own. So some quick use cases in case you quite haven't grasped on what I'm saying. There are certain professors already who are about to retire from their areas of study and areas of practice. And because they're going to retire, they're starting to basically create a digital twin version of themselves, so that once they're retired and once they're long outside of their industry and teaching, their professorship may continue in the form of an AI form of themselves. And so we're seeing that more often. It's going to permeate more cases. There is an AI bot that was created through imagery of many different Afro-Latinas across the world in imagery through GANs. And so that approach has been used where there's actually, she's called Clara or Clara, C-L-A-I-R-A. And this is a bot that exists today, and in the form of an AI, she's doing speaking engagements, talking about the future of work, talking about artificial intelligence, and you can have a real-time conversation with this intelligent digital worker. So they're getting paid and everything. And this exists today. You're probably seeing it through social media influencers that have their own, it's an AI who has its own image, their face, their voice, their bots, digital workers that are getting paid and everything on social media as influencers. So we're gonna see more of this happening today. Another way in which AI is reimagining what the workforce is considering total workforce management as an idea. So we know that we have full-time workers, we have contingent workers, we have all of that, but now organizations are leaning in to be able to take advantage of how do we work together with a digital worker, a contingent worker, an full-time employee, and manage them correctly and get the best out of them as far as using AI to be able to further insights and get insights around scheduling, hiring needs, diversity, equity, and inclusion gaps, engagement, cost and budgeting, learning requirements. So all of that is helping. And one of the best use cases that I like to see as far as how organizations are thinking about using AI is thinking about skills matching. And as long as you're finding where the skills match the project that you have, and AI is enabling that. Finally, on this topic of the worker or the workforce, roles are opening up. And I know, contrary to popular belief, a lot of people fear and have trepidation that AI is going to come and take away all jobs. Well, I will say and remind you that there's a stat by the World Economic Forum that says that by the year 2025, so just a little around the corner here, 97 million jobs should be created because of AI. So beyond just data scientists and your typical paths and professions that go into artificial intelligence, the worker is also now in AI. It's product designers that we need. We need legislators because of the European Union and different scientific approaches such as anthropologists, sociologists. This is an area in which many people are now going to come together because of AI and start to get into corporations, workforces, and industries that they probably didn't have access to before, all because of AI's expansion. One of the particular focus areas that I love is about NGOs. There's one that I know of that is a group that's teaching refugees and youth in refugee camps how to obtain AI skills. The workers are expanding, it's globalizing, it's becoming more inclusive. Second area I wanted to talk about is AI is helping to reimagine the work that we're doing. You think about this for a second. Your industry, your role, how much has it changed since AI has become more ubiquitous? Think about it. I'm sure you're probably using AI-enabled tools every day, probably not even noticing it. You're new work that should be done, new AI capabilities to grow and solve problems like cybersecurity issues, ESG issues, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and even some environmental social responsibility, decentralization, and access to opportunities through information like Web3. The last part that I want to talk about to you today, so we just talked about how AI is changing the workforce, the work that's being done, and the workplace. So listen in for this one. So the workplace, interestingly enough, the pandemic spurred cloud and AI-enabled capabilities to help some people really be able to work from anywhere. I want to give you some examples. One enterprise-sized organization that I know of, they saw a 200% jump in the use of artificial intelligence for key aspects of remote meeting engagement. And so in-person meetings and in virtual meetings. In the office, we're seeing as well many more uses of AI. In fact, for health and safety, because of the pandemic, we've seen public transportation that's automated and autonomous, being able to understand the traffic and the flow of humans, not just for traffic and transport, but we've seen it in actual physical buildings to be able to recommend wellness actions, to help make the environment safe, and even create opportunities for inclusion by noticing where there may be some disparity. Finally, the metaverse. The metaverse. So working and collaborating in virtual spaces powered by AI, VR, AR, 3D, blockchain, and 5G. Organizations are leaning more into the fact that work can be done in a more decentralized, created a virtual store, and they actually have an employee working in that virtual store in the metaverse. Brands like Nike, Gucci, Walmart, they're all building virtual storefronts. And more organizations are leaning into virtual meeting rooms, They're taking on AI-enabled avatars for their people to be able to work, sell, train. Storytelling is happening. Creativity is happening. That's enabled by an AI assistant that you go and tell it what you're trying to build, and it helps you to build it. So it's all augmenting the human experience. We're seeing meetings conducted with a hologram, right? Being able to be projected in a physical space, all enabled by AI. So as I wrap, analytics and digital twins and AR and VR and AI even, all that I've said is nothing new. But we've added this extra layer of intelligence. More AI that works for the good of everybody is one that I can get behind. You guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and thanks for having me at today's conference.
Thanks a lot, Giselle. It was brilliant to listen to you with so much passion, and we just need to spread this passion about the topics. And I think what is really important that everyone, parents, grandparents, children, just everyone needs to understand that. And you're just bringing it in a perfect way. I'm really happy to have you with us here. And I'm really looking forward to have more discussion with you. And actually, I have already an idea, and I will take it up with you bilaterally after our event. So now, thanks a lot. And we are getting to our last session, actually last panel. Now we have arrived to our last discussion, taking AI Center of Excellence to the next level, leaving the trap of proof of concept, planning, kickoff, strategic scaling, industrialization. Now this panel will be led by the incredible Wayne, an AI and intelligent automation expert based in Texas. But before I'm introducing you to Wayne, I will introduce you to his panel. As first, we do have Emma. Emma, you are a professor of philosophy and AI ethics, who has worked in the philosophy and science and technology for more than 20 years. You were the chair of the experts group that wrote the draft for the UNESCO recommendation on the ethics of AI. You currently focus on machine ethics and AI ethics policymaking. You aim to establish ethics as the core enabler for responsible data-driven innovation and successful business models, and encourage recognition of the value of intercultural discussion and advocates against any form of epidemistic injustice in AI innovation and development. Great to have you with us here today. As a second, with you on stage, we have Yves. You are a data strategist and industry analyst focused on data management. You are a holistic data practitioner and like to think unconventionally. To share your insights on the data market, you act as the European content director of DM Radio, which has 1 million listeners in the US coast to coast. Sorry, I have to get a sip of water. I'm very sorry. At least you know I'm not an avatar. I'm the lit and I'm a real person. So bear with me. Interestingly, I also heard when you need to stay in the flow of dive into your passion for music, creativity, and tech, and spin the deck as a DJ to make the crowd dance. I must say that is what I call diversity in interest. Then we're coming to you, Igor. You currently serve as a chief data scientist at Liberhill Aerospace. You run the data scientist organization focusing on artificial intelligence, machine learning, industrialization, predictive maintenance, and process mining. You're also an executive AI advisor, keynote speaker, and pioneering innovations leader with a proven history of successfully transforming international AI and IoT digital services and organizations. Igor, welcome to our stage. Somehow we have here the wrong picture, I think, isn't it? So I will go on and we will solve the rest of our
let's
Now I will introduce you to Payam. You have worked in academia and corporates for 10 years and have established various data science and AI functions within telecom, financial, digital, and gaming sectors. You have recently brought your experience and focus into the startup world, and in particular, cybersecurity and AI. You're currently head of data and AI at Plerium, the security and AI company. Your mission is to bring AI and intelligent threat detection in cloud security, environment, and workload. Payam, it is a really great pleasure to have you with us. And now let me introduce you to the chair of this panel, Wayne. I heard about the super onboarding calls that you had, Wayne, and I hardly wait for you moderating this great panel. Before that, let me introduce you short and crisp, and then I hand it over to you directly. Wayne, you are a mega early adapter who has been using intelligent automation since 2010, while at Telefonica, you created one of the first global centers of excellence around no-code technologies, creating a platform to scale and innovate and delivering millions of hours back to the business. I must say, I really liked your headliner on LinkedIn. Dear audience, check that out. Automation expert with practitioner war wounds to prove it. It's great when we can stand up for those war wounds, and that what we also want to on this stage. Speak out, but also worst failures. This is where we can learn from each other. So that is how we learn, and this is how I want to hand over to you, Wayne. The panel and virtual stage is all yours.
Thank you very much for the kind intros for the whole panel. So for everyone's benefit, in case you are not aware, this is a truly global panel. We are coming at you from 4 continents and actually across 2 days. So we have representatives in Wednesday and in Thursday across these 4, the 4 panelists, including myself. So hello, everybody. I'm Wayne Butterfield. I am the most British sounding Texan that there is. And it's my great pleasure actually to host today's panel. We have had some great pre-discussions and I'm really interested in the answers to the questions that we've got. This is going to be quick. Okay, we've got about 15 questions in 30 minutes. So I am going to rinse every ounce of knowledge from my guests. They have been pre-warned, so hopefully they will end the panel with smiles and not stress. So anyway, welcome everybody. I hope you've had a great day so far, and let's get right into the meat of things. So Payam, I'm going to start with you. You are joining us from Australia, and it's Thursday for anyone who was interested in that. It is 2:20 a.m. in the morning, so please, it's the middle of the night for Payam, so we do have to bear that in mind. But I'm going to go with you first, and question number 1. Okay, we're talking here about moving from pilot into production. Like, define what a pilot is, and what do we mean by production?
First, hi everyone, and thanks Wayne for the intro. By definition, when we talk about production grade, either is a job, process, product, or service, right? We're referring to the end of the production line for our either internal or external users. Literally the things that is at the end of end users. And again, by the definition, it has to address the problem, to solve the problem of the end user. But how we're going to build that process mainly based on some of the assumptions we have, some of the understanding about the problems. But that's definitely it's not enough. We're required to learn from end users, either as a customer or internal. That's why pilot, not as a stage or as a phase, it's as a program, allows us to work closely with our end users, our customers, or even internal, to learn about them, to learn about the problem back and forth, and try to build gradually the things that leads us to the production. Mainly, I can say that pilot is a program that allows us to learn from customers and back and forth through to ends up to production line.
Right. Okay. So pilot, absolutely get it. A way for us to learn. Production is obviously when we're taking that learning and putting it in into production, into live. Yves, you know, I hear this a lot. There's a pilot issue. You know, everyone's in pilot mode. No one's moving to production. What are the problems? What is inhibiting our ability to move from pilots to production in the world of AI?
Well, I think it has to do with well, not think, I'm quite sure it has to do with the maturity of the organization. Do they have an architecture in place? Are they mature on their architecture? Maybe sometimes they only have one system in place and they do the pilot on that one system, and then unfortunately that stays not a few months in place, but longs for a few years. One of the problems as well in a pilot is that we have no clear expectations on what are we trying to achieve with a pilot, either on a technical level or on a business level. So what are the expectations? Why are we doing this pilot? And as well, support from business leadership and the business teams themselves. They often are not included in these type of pilots, and it remains kind of only technical pilots. So really showing the business value of that pilot is sometimes pretty hard. And that's why if you don't see that value, you never will move it into production and never make it a part of your business and use that as an advantage in your business. One of the other problems, what we often see is that the tech stack is different between a pilot environment and a production. So scaling up onto production is one of those issues, what we very often see. And then not to speak of the culture, because if your organization is not mature, you see very often this is, okay, this is how we do it. We just are agile. We just throw it in production, and we don't respect any kind of software life cycle where you really do the testing, validation, acceptation, and then you're quite sure if you implement a pilot into production that you won't face any real problems. You anticipate the problems that you can see because there is always some bug lying around or whatever. So those are our most common issues what we see if you want to move from pilot to production. And next to that, still skill set and data are very parameters that we see that makes you fail into moving to production.
Excellent. Okay, great. Okay, so I think that helps. Igor, you know, the theme of this event is around the AI COE. Does the AI COE, you know, does that do anything to enable this? You know, do you have to have an AI COE in order to really move from production to pilot?
Yeah, thank you. It's actually a great question. Do we need AI center, or we can do different? Of course, we have a different ways to shape this solution to make a step forwards. But when I'm thinking about AI, that we can see that AI nowadays is a very powerful technology solution which can shape our business to show new ways and so on. On another hand, on the flip side, we see the big risk with the AI, connected with the AI technology. And companies investing ton of budget in new technology, having new high expectation and even expectation delivery over expectation, and it means that we need to deliver a kind of trust to business, to be able to drive new project and to build up this trust, to consolidate technical mind, to consolidate business mind, to build up some platform. And I believe this is possible within AI center.
Okay, excellent. Okay, Thank you. Payam, again, just back to you for now, and then I've got a few questions for Emma, actually, but where would you start? And then I'm also thinking about, does this differ? Do we, we've got audience members from different regions. We've got them from public, private sector, startup. Does all of this, is there a one size fits all? What's your kind of your thoughts on where do we start?
By the definition of center of excellence, and in particular AI center of excellence, it covers lots of areas, but mainly there are 4 areas that I refer them as a pillar. These pillars belongs to things like leadership, best practice, things like research and development, support and training. These are the main pillar of the center of excellence. And I want to say that to start, that would be the best practice. It would be the key that allows the organization, regardless it's the industry or is it the sector, allows that follow the standards and the practice that will feed it, will suit it to the industry. The things that they start from, hey, is AI is something that well suited for this application? Can kind of like powered this application by AI? How to do that? How to measure the effectiveness? What would be the strategy for interpretability, for fairness, for ethic, for all of these things? So that's why where to start, that would be establishing the practice. What is the best practice for this? But of course, when you drill down on this, it would be quite a little bit different across the sectors and industry. The things that is more working with the end customers that impact on the decisioning, maybe things like ethic or explainability is more important from the best practice point of view.
Right. Now, you've mentioned ethics a couple of times there, Emma. I was purposely waiting to bring and to wait for ethics to come into the conversation, to bring in your vast experience here. What role should ethics play in an AI COE?
Thanks, Wayne. It is important that ethics plays an active role. So ethics is one of the resources that companies can employ to successfully productionize AI. And as such, ethics should play an active role. AI COEs are not only business tools, but also political and social tools. And ethics enables business success. It's a resource in all business practices or processes throughout the AI life cycle. So what should happen typically in an AI COE in terms of ethics is that both AI and AI ethics vision should be created to enable the identification of business-driven use cases, which would define the data platform and tools needed to deliver products and services with the most beneficial social impact and the least harmful ethical impact. So a network of both AI and AI ethics champions should be established and maintained. And ethical standards related to any risk associated with relevant AI systems should be identified through multi-stakeholder engagement, not top-down, bottom-up, and cross-disciplinary impact assessment and a risk management framework be established. Fair, accountable, transparent practices should be established and extended to address all risk-related concerns, and talent should be built with an applicable, consistent upskilling provided on both the tech and social ethical side. So if you include such roles for ethics in AI COEs, this could lead to effective risk management in terms of concerns such as robustness, accuracy, fairness, transparency, explainability, and integrity of data, and understanding of the ethical implications of the company's own processes and products, translation of those into meaningful insights to ensure support for products, communication and implementation of best practices across the company, and ultimately increased market value. It's a very good strategic move to include ethics in the functioning of an AI COE because it gives you the edge.
Right. You mentioned two things though, AI ethics and data ethics. Right. Is there a difference? Right. Talk to me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, okay, there is a difference, at least in my mind. So data ethics centers on issues of fairness, transparency, accountability, data security and integrity, privacy, explainability and interpretability, and so on. Where concerns addressed by AI ethics as an umbrella term for instance, machine ethics, data ethics, information ethics, neuroethics, and even AI ethics policymaking include more broader concerns. Concerns such as those around automated decision-making, for instance, in financial risk analysis or bail hearings, healthcare diagnosis, law enforcement, of course, privacy and integrity of data as well, but also then concerns around the integrity of information and communication, cybersecurity, damage to the environment and ecosystems, transgression of labor rights, human relationships, the quality of human relationships, warfare concerns, the use of lethal autonomous weapon systems, political stability and social justice, concerns around AI and children and future generations, and even in terms of culture. Who does artworks belong to? What is the nature of authenticity if we make use of AI systems in producing fine and performing arts and literature? So as an umbrella term, AI ethics focuses at its core on humans' unique experiences being challenged in some way, human agency being limited, and transgression of rights such as privacy, labor, children, and future generational rights, negative impact on the right to self-determination, constraining the realization of socioeconomic rights, transgressing rights related to a safe environment, and seriously imperiling the right to mental integrity. So data ethics fits within all of this, but I hope in the end I'll get to show you why we also need the broader lens, even in business. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. Brilliant explanation. Thank you ever so much for that. You mentioned culture, but I always like to start with strategy. So Payam, let's go back to strategy. Is that the way to start? Is that how we should kick off?
That's pretty good questions, because from my point of view, AI Center of Excellence can be literally like an input, like an umbrella or input towards the different part of the organization's product or streamline, or could be other around, in a way that products or streamline or different kind of like the groups as a funnel goes through the Center of Excellence. Literally, one of them, the former, is more like a Center of Excellence that AI is like augmented to the products, and the other way around is more like a filtering, more like a refinement of that with the AI habits. So that literally leads to that a strategy comes first. Right. Based on the requirement, a strategy, it comes here which way is well fitted to the end of the product or end of the user experience. Either we're going to augment AI as a function towards our product, or no, we have the product, we want to tailor it for our customers, or like make it personalized. That's why I believe that a strategy comes first to define what would be the benefit through this.
Right. Okay. So I love the phrase "culture eats strategy" for breakfast. Right. So Igor, any advice on how to drive cultural change to AI adoption?
Yeah, thank you for this question. Actually, indeed, it's a very, very hard question to culture changes. Because we facing technology trend development, double exponential technology trend development, and in the same time facing the big gap between culture changes. And I believe the good way to build AI center, it's build the center as a human-centric center. It means we will, at the end of the day, we will create solution for human. And we need to start from human, from the culture, to create solution which will be used by human, and of course in this case ethic that we talk about it already play crucial role. And back to your question, how to drive culture changes, it's probably one of the ways storytelling and communication. It means first of all to explain what we are doing, our purpose, and try to build the trust in this way, and after that come to strategy and technology and solution.
Superb. Yves, let me come to you quickly then. So we'll keep on on this theme, I guess. Igor mentioned trust. Do you think it's a cultural issue why organizations have struggled to move from pilot into production? Is it a trust issue, perhaps? Is that underpinned by a culture? What's your view?
Yeah, definitely. It's related to that. In culture, I think about the politics and the social aspect and the ethics, as Emma mentioned, but as well, it's a regional aspect. Type of companies, the fear, what you mentioned as well, Wayne, is the fear for failure. So, or taking action, what blocks you, and depending on how your organization looks at you taking initiative or just pushing things forward, that is the culture. What I see that. Maybe pushes back on implementing new technology, moving the pilot into production, or really understanding what the value is of doing your pilot, or bringing in AI, which is kind of still fearless for a lot of people because it's so multi-layered. So definitely culture plays a role in how you, well, communicate that within your organization and why you are doing things.
Superb. Emma, we've mentioned a couple of times there about ethics. It's kind of come out in the culture and ethics almost kind of hand in hand there. Do you think there's a worry from organizations about how ethical the work that they are doing in AI is having? Do you think that ethics is playing a role in people moving into production because they are worried about ethics?
Yeah, but I think it does, but it's because people misunderstand the role that ethics plays and the nature of AI ethics as a particular kind of system. So ethics should be enabling and strengthening and adding an edge. Ethics is in fact not an abstract domain, and it's not a mechanism meant to curb innovation. It's a dynamic cross-cutting domain able to actualize full technological success of AI products and should be supported in practical ways. For instance, I'll just give a few examples. By allowing identification of existing infrastructure that a data and AI ethics program can leverage, formulation of a data and AI ethical risk framework that is tailored to the industry and can adequately protect identified ethical standards, translation of abstract concept into practice. So if we talk about respecting dignity, this simply means showing respect to users of software by asking them to sign letters of consent, informing them of the use of AI algorithms in decisions that impact their lives, or giving them editing access to the data gathered from interaction with them. We can also support ethics as a practical positive tool by optimizing guidance and tools for product managers. While an ethical framework provides high-level guidance, it's essential that at a granular level, there are tools developed in cross-disciplinary teams to help managers navigate risks. So, for instance, building tools that can scale explainability, so that possible tensions between ideals such as explainability and accuracy or transparency and robustness can be mitigated. And also support can be given by establishing an organizational awareness and providing formal and informal incentivization of employees to play a role in identifying AI ethics risks and means to mitigate these risks, and then monitoring impacts and engagement of stakeholders. So ethics is a core ingredient and positive resource for productionizing AI. To view it as an obstacle to progress or innovation is a complete misapplication of the power of ethics as a dynamic tool to navigate risk and to build trust in the very products that we are trying to actionalize.
Excellent. Wow, amazing insights. Thank you. Okay, so many people have joined this panel because they want to hopefully hear about the successes that we have all had in helping move from pilot to production. So Igor, I'm going to come to you. Let's talk about success. Top tips. How are we going to help the audience who are stuck in pilot purgatory? Enlighten us, please.
Yeah, I believe that one of the way to come out from this trap is to try to find the question on which AI already generate a lot of data-driven solution. Because usually when people come inside the AI area, they facing a lot of answer, a lot of automatic generated answer by AI data-driven answer, and so on and so on. And coming to dangerous is just forgetting the question, what we want to answer with this answer, which business problem we can face, and keeping in mind always where we start, always this business problem will, from my point of view, will really help to close this loop and to move from the test environment to the production and industrialization phase.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so that's number one. Yves, let's again stick on this success. So please feel free to fire us your answer.
Well, I think Igor already covered a lot of the success factors. Any tips I can give is definitely related to previous comments, is make sure that you can drive your pilot towards a business outcome, and then think about risk, compliance, cost and opportunity, and move them across those angles. Make sure as well for a pilot that you time box your pilot, put an end date on an end of life date on your pilot that forces you to look to these outcomes or formulate the expected success, and make sure that you have the executive buy-in to do the pilot. Communication is a very important aspect on it as well. Communicate on your progress, on your results, on your findings, and communicate that with every stakeholder that could benefit from that pilot. And as well, focusing on some unique business problem. Don't try to shoot at everything at the same time in that pilot, and that helps you guarantee more success. And an important thing is as well anticipating a learning curve. If you're moving into new technology, this is a green field sometimes, something where you don't have experience, and that can consume a lot of time as well.
Brilliant. Okay, Payam, final thoughts, words of wisdom?
Yeah, sure. I really, a few times refer to the best practice. I'm really emphasizing on the best practice because literally that's the key that allows the center of excellence plays an integral role within the organization, either based on the definition that it augmented through the product line or it's the other round. But at the end, everything ends up to the end user, to the customers, and it's not the end of the line. The feedback need to back to the product, to the center of excellence again. It's like a loop. So that's why I'm trying to change the best practice to the next practice. In fact, we don't have best. It's always next. It's always we're looking for best at that time and looking for what for next as a dynamism through the behavior of the customers, to the nature of our requirement. That's why center of excellence, the role maybe would be around what is the next practice? What is the next practice? Always keep a walk. What is the next practice? Try to bring this dynamism across the organization based on the customer's requirement. I believe that would be pretty much things.
Super, love it. Emma, final thoughts from you?
Establish a team within the COE, maybe a data ethics and sustainability officer to interact with the technology and operation officers, but scale what you expect of them to fit the size of your company. If you have a startup, don't try to have to think of all these ethical concerns. Just maybe focus on data security, robustness, fairness, transparency, and and be done with it. So you can always adapt. Create awareness in your company of the cross-disciplinary nature of the systems you are dealing with. And this is why it is important to think of the broader concerns in AI ethics. These systems that you are dealing with are not technical systems. They are systems that are generated based on human data that ultimately influence human data. But humans are not data points. They cannot be reduced in this way or only at the peril of the company. Create sensitivity and respect for the cross-cutting and enabling role of ethics. And this can only be done if AI ethics is allowed to play an active role, a concrete role, rather than being allocated some abstract prescriptive one. Have an AI ethics budget. Show that you take it as seriously as technical needs. Work for the benefit of the users of your products and show them how and that you are doing this. And then in the end, trust will come. And with trust will come full adoption of your products. And that will mean full realization of their benefits. And that will up your market value.
Excellent. Fantastic. I think we are just about on time. I can see I think we've been talking for 28 minutes, so we can give you back 2 minutes of time. Thank you. I didn't lie when I said that we had literally 15, 16 questions to run through. So thank you, panel, for your glorious insights. Hopefully the audience have all found that incredibly useful. I know I have personally. So thank you for your time and effort and insights. And Andy and team, back to you.
Thanks again to our great panelists and also to you, Wayne. It was really great. I have the feeling I have to, repeat myself, but it is just how it is. And this is exactly what you mentioned also. We need to share our experience, and we need to encourage each other. We need to encourage the people who at the end of the day are driving the various companies. So we will keep on sharing your experience, and saying that, I would like also to reach out again to all the people out there who has something to share. Please come up, speak up, make it happen all together. Thank you all for being with us. It was another half an hour of incredible insights, very important views. Again, seeing how important the human being is and how important it is also to do the little steps, to fail, to learn, to have the experience, get up and have success at the end. Thanks a lot and see you soon. Dear audience, I mentioned it already. It's really important that we share our experience. A lot of you out there are listening and have their own great experience, best practice, worst failures, use cases, how they deal with the team, how they deal with the companies, from big ones to small ones. We had some questions coming up. Hey, what does it mean for SMEs? Not only for the big ones. We are today on a level where we need to discuss that also for the smaller companies. How can we adapt solution based on AI within SMEs? So please reach out to us. Tell us what you're struggling with. Tell us what you want to share, and we will make sure we will bring you on stage. Now, I can't believe we're getting to the end. We're getting to our final keynote, our grande finale. What, for a change, will be a little bit different. Let me first introduce you to Franck Gazzola.
Hello, how are you?
Thanks a lot. It's great, and I'm really happy to have you with us today. And let me first introduce you quickly to our audience, because today we have got you as an inspired, a very special person. For the first sight, Franck may not suit into the regular speaker lineup of AI leaders and experts, but he's used from the perspective of courage, fearlessness, passion, and drive. These qualities are also fundamental when we talk about new ways, changes, and development. And this is how AI comes into the conversation. Franck, you are an adventure and documentary photographer, as well as a public speaker who has had a successful corporate career. One coincidence after another led you to take photographs of the hidden side of the sea ice in the Arctic. Today, you travel the world documentation, inspiring people who do their bit for the planet. You just co-wrote your first book, Between Two Worlds, and your international editorial publications, including Geo-National Geographics, Red Bulletin, Oceanographic, Le Figaro, and La Tribune de Genève. Franck, welcome to our stage. It's all yours now, focusing on leaving the well-known comfort zone which most of us hesitate about. The virtual stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Now, I want to take you today, I want to take you on a journey through personal change, a journey through extraordinary adventure, and a journey to the belly of the ocean. But as you will see, I had no special gift or talent. I actually believe that you can achieve a lot more through hard work, determination, and a twist of luck. I want to start with this first slide. This is Jacques Cousteau, a pioneer in oceanic exploration and an icon for my generation. Well, I've never met Jacques Cousteau yet. He's had a major influence as to why I get to stand here before you today. Because I wasn't always an adventure and documentary photographer. At the age of 35, I decided to give up a successful corporate career to taking photographs of the beach, the ocean, and documenting expeditions for a living. But contrary to what most people think, radical changes do not happen overnight. They're usually the result of small incremental steps that are invisible to the outside world. As you can hear, I was born in France, and as a kid growing up near Paris, I wasn't allowed to watch much TV, except when Jacques Cousteau was on. And this was my only real exposure to the ocean, but that was enough. I was drawn to the water, and it became my favorite playground the minute I could enjoy it fully. Now, fast forward 20 years, my wife and I decided to migrate to Australia, and we settled in the famous beach of Bondi Beach. Bondi had everything I loved. You know, it had the rocks, the raw ocean, the waves, the surf, the people. That's when I picked up a camera, because I had great subjects to shoot as an amateur photographer. And soon after that, coincidentally, I met someone called Brad Mallion. He had started the Frothers Gallery, specializing in ocean imagery. Now, he offered me to become a contributor to his gallery. My mission was to go and shoot the beach at sunrise, most days of the week, capture the landscape, the surf, the people, and take the best images, send them out in a newsletter and through social media, all that before going to work in the city. Now, that was the first step in my evolution. I had to step up my game because I've got to be honest, my first photos were average at best. Henri Cartier-Bresson said, your first 10,000 photographs are the worst. Now, shooting on a daily basis and having an audience forced me to become a better photographer quicker. And my work became better and more consistent. It taught me how to be agile and shoot with all kinds of available light. My sense of composition had to become fast and intuitive, as I could never really stage anything that I was shooting. But one day, Brad told me that he was going to shut down the gallery. So I bought the gallery off him. Now, this was a lot of work because remember, I still wear a suit and a tie every day. And I travel a lot for my work. So essentially, all my free time is dedicated to my photography. I take a week off work to go and shoot the surf in Fiji. I take a day off from work to go and shoot a commercial job. I shoot weddings on the weekend, family portraits. I said yes to everything, which was probably a mistake, but it made me learn faster. And the passion was gradually turning into a paying job. I was coming to a crossroad, but there was still something lacking for me. And this is when Jacques Cousteau comes back in a conversation that would take me on a completely new trajectory. I wanted to rebrand the gallery's website. So I was referred to a web developer. And one of the first questions he asked me was, what would be your ultimate assignment as a photographer? And I said, oh, you know what? When I was a kid, I really admired what Jacques Cousteau was doing. So doing something like this for me would be actually amazing. And he said to me, I actually know this couple, Emmanuel and Guylain Bardou. They're currently in the northern part of Greenland on board an expedition ship with their team doing underwater and under ice exploration for science. They're called Under the Pole. If you want, I can put you in touch with them. And I must be honest, I didn't know Under the Pole, so I went online, and what I saw absolutely blew my mind. And plus, they were doing it with a 2-year-old at the time, and now they have 2. So I said, yes, please put me in touch. So I sent 1 email, 2, 3, 4, and then one day I got a reply. Something like, thanks for reaching out. We might need actually another photographer during our wintering month. So let's Skype. So I Skyped with Guilain Bardou here, the leader of the expedition here on the right. It's amazing, everything's going well. The gig is mine, all good, you know. And at the end of the call, I said, but I want to make sure, you know, I'm going to be able to shoot under the ice. And he said to me, what's your diving level? And I said, open water. Now, for those who don't know, open water is like level 0 of diving. So he just laughed at me and he said, nah, mate, you're not going to dive with us. And I said to him, look, I've got 6 months between now and the time I join you on the boat. I'm going to do everything I can to be ready to dive with you, but you decide whether I'm fit to dive or not. And he said, okay, fair enough. So essentially, for the next 6 months, all my money and free time were dedicated to learning how to dive with absolutely no guarantee that this would pay off. But more importantly, to go on that assignment, I had to quit my job. So I resigned and I jumped with both feet into the unknown. And it did pay off. The water here is minus 1.7 degrees. My fingers are numbed by the cold and I can barely feel the knobs and the triggers of my camera. My feet are frozen, but I take it all in. And after all, it's like a hot bath when you think about it, because on the other side of the ice, it's about minus 25, minus 30 degrees. And believe me, there's absolutely no hot shower involved after a dive like that. So if this sounds like your worst nightmare, well, for me, the first time in my career, I felt that I was actually where I belonged. And look at the reward. This was our 60-foot schooner caught in the sea ice for the wintering month under the Northern Lights. This first expedition with Under the Pole made me realize something. I finally discovered what I was lacking in my quest for beautiful images, a powerful and meaningful stories to go with them. Working with Under the Pole gave me access to more powerful stories about, you know, saving the Great Barrier Reef in Australia and replanting corals, or protecting the manta rays in Peru, or understanding the whale sharks better in Western Australia. But 18 months after returning from Greenland, Under the Pole gave me a phone call offering me to become their official photographer for their next expedition. We were embarking on a 4-year journey around the world, from the Arctic to the Antarctic, across the Pacific, in order to explore the twilight zone under all latitude. Now, the twilight zone, also called mesophotic area, is roughly between minus 30 meters and minus 150 meters. It is widely unknown because it's usually too deep for conventional divers, but it's also too shallow when you have the means to use submersibles, for instance. So what I thought was going to be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity was actually becoming a lifestyle. So we started off by sailing through the infamous Northwest Passage from Greenland all around to Alaska, which comes with a few challenges. Trying to find signs of biofluorescence and bioluminescence, as well as trying to do an inventory of the underwater Arctic biodiversity. Then we arrived in French Polynesia for an ambitious program called Deep Hope, studying the mesophotic corals, or the deep corals, and trying to paint a new picture of the reef from the surface down to 120 meters and even deeper. During this Deep Hope program, Guilain and his team found the deepest mesophotic coral ever sampled, 172 meters under the surface. This is what the twilight zone looks like at about 80 meters under the surface, 80. When I took that shot, I actually can't believe I'm there. You know, only a few years back, I was only allowed to 18 meters, 1/8. I had never really taken any underwater images other than with a GoPro. And then there was the ice, and then there was learning how to dive deeper and longer. Now, the biggest learning for me in all of this, being brave is not about diving deep or crossing rough ocean. Not being scared to be a beginner over and over again is what I would define as being brave. For the last 6 years, I've had to learn to be comfortable being constantly out of my comfort zone. Now, my advice to people wanting to make a change in their life, be ready to suck at everything again, and don't let your ego get in the way. That's very important. Then we were on to our next mission, the capsule. The idea was to monitor the reef over several days at a time, which meant actually living underwater to let the environment get used to our presence and diving with no time limits. We lived on another planet for 4 days. We lived an experience that is very hard to describe, living in the belly of the ocean, diving, doing science, coming back inside the capsule to make more observations. But I know that this experience is not for everyone. It was 3 of us in 4 cubic meters to do everything: sleep, eat, drink, rest, and work. So you got to love your teammates very, very much. But I must say, as a young dad at the time, one of the great things about living in the ocean is that you cannot hear your baby crying at night. I actually slept really, really well in that capsule. Our continuous presence, day and night, made the environment completely oblivious to our presence. We left the surface on Tuesday morning and we came back on Friday afternoon. We were not far, but it felt like a trip into space. Guilain, Emmanuel, and their team had built this incredibly functional tool to observe the ocean from within, bypassing some of the human physiological constraints, and I had captured their story. Now, looking back 6 years ago, my life was very comfortable, but lacking purpose. Taking that very first step towards change has been probably the most defining and courageous moment of my life. Every step that followed was just getting easier, even if it might have appeared harder to the outside world. So my advice is simple: dare. You don't have to be the best, and things won't be perfect to start with, but just dare. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thanks a lot, Franck. That was really, really impressive. And I would like to deep dive in some question together with you about your inspiring story. And can you tell us, what are you up next? Oh. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, yeah, I can hear you.
So can you tell us, what are you up next?
Well, as a matter of fact, I'm going to be taking off in about 3 weeks and join the team in the Svalbard, which is the very, very north of Norway, the probably further north archipelago in the northern hemisphere, for about 2 months. And then I'll be going to the Canary Islands a little bit later in this year too. We're going to be working on the underwater forests of the Twilight Zone, which are like oases of life. It's a bit like a mirror of the forests we know on land. We want to focus on these rich ecosystems because they're widely unknown, especially in the Twilight Zone, and they're very important, just like a forest. If you want to, we use this analogy, if you want to protect the orangutan, you can protect the orangutan as much as you want, but unless you protect the actual forest, the orangutan is going to disappear. Now, this is why we are looking at those ecosystems, which are very complex, but also very interesting because they're they are the habitat of a lot of different species, and they need support and protection and conservation. But the real next chapter of Under the Pole is called Deep Life. It's 10 years of exploration on board a really innovative oceanographic ship currently being built in order to support global research of the Twilight Zone as part of the United Nations Decade for the Ocean program, which goes from 2022 to 2032.
Wow, what is also very important for the whole climate sustainability topic. Now, I would like, besides what we've heard about getting out of the comfort zone and not be afraid of being a beginner, I would like a little bit to bridge now to our topic, AI. How is this new boat state of the art? Is it equipped by some special technology? Is AI something that matters in your field?
Well, first of all, the boat's going to be a little bit bigger, and that will accommodate more space for all the scientific work on board. That means labs, but also storing live samples, etc. It will also have the necessary safety features required by the intensity of those deep diving programs, like a recompression chamber on board, especially useful because we reach really remote part of the globe. Regarding if AI matters, until now, not really, but from now on, we will need AI as a tool to achieve our goal, which is ocean conservation and protection. For us, AI is about connecting what we see down there, what we collect, what we analyze underwater, and connecting it with the data that is already available from satellites like temperature imagery or the buoys, at the surface, measuring the winds, the currents, etc. Now we need AI to connect the dots. One, because it gets to get prediction modeling, to be cross-referenced with general climate modeling tool, to be also able to guesstimate the area of interest where underwater forests or other ecosystems, for that matter, may be thriving or at risk. And the ultimate goal for us as well is to have the means and the data to convince decision makers, policy makers, to implement protection and conservation rules. Now, this part of what we're trying to do here with AI kind of fits in really well with the UN program called DITO, which stands for a digital twin of the ocean, which is a program to support ocean protection, ocean governance, and a sustainable blue economy. Now, with the support of AI, it really helps greatly, or it will help greatly over time, answering a lot of questions that kind of starts with what if, Ultimately, with enough data, we could predict that, something like, what if the temperature goes up 1 degree and the salinity goes down, for instance, on a specific part of the world? Well, it could help us compare with things we know and we have observed and predict how beneficial or detrimental this change could be for a given environment.
Okay, so we had some other questions also that we discussed that we would like to share with the audience, but unfortunately, due to the time constraint that we have, I would like to just dig into one point that it's very important to you and for us. It's actually great to see how AI can help your scientific work. And we discussed before our interview or before your presentation that unfortunately, until today, you're not working already with partners. So one thing is, if you can just summarize very briefly what you are looking to, what are the things that you will need, because we have here an AI audience, great people with great experience, great companies who may actually be your right partners. And so listen carefully. Perhaps Franck will be your future customer. Franck, can you just summarize quickly what you're looking for?
Yes. So look, to answer your question, partnerships are critical in our field because we are mostly financed through private funding and sponsorship, as well as supported by a wide range of technical partners who provide technical solutions, equipment, diving gear, etc. And now finding a partner in this field of AI, I know it could seem a bit far-fetched from the core business of some of the AI key players, but I don't think it is. It's putting AI at the service of one of the most noble causes that there is, which is the ocean. You know, if the oceans die, we die. So I think it's a pretty strong incentive to get involved. For us today, finding a partner in this field who can help our scientists and our scientific consortium is key. All we need really to start with is a discussion with a potential partner to unlock some potential. As we know, you know, understanding what we need and understanding what can be done can really lead to, you know, sky's the limit here. You know, we know that there are things that already exist that need to be tweaked. We know that there are things that maybe do not exist today. I don't know, but for instance, we could think of. I was talking about, you know, connecting the dots, but we could also think about kind of facial recognition of fish underwater. So you can have a pretty, you know, use this kind of technology that already exists and tweak them for a different use in a different context. And that's really something that we need to initiate a discussion with, either through a technical partner or a sponsor or both. That's really
so
what
this is exactly where we can step in. And dear audience, I think this is one of the nice examples that we have here, someone who has not started yet his AI journey with AI. It's a very important subject to all of us, especially from a climate perspective. So we also in the future would like to onboard industries, people, projects who are seeking for knowledge, who are willing to do the first steps, and they need our audience, our community. So feel free, reach out to Franck for further discussion. And saying that, Franck, many thanks for sharing your diverse experience with our audience. On one hand, encouraging all of us being brave and going out of our comfort zone, not being afraid of being a beginner. And on the other hand, whether AI can support us in different industries that we normally hear of. And actually talking about that, when you said this sentence, not being afraid to be a beginner, dear audience, when the pandemic started and we knew that we have to start with our virtual events, and I had to stand in front of the camera for the first time, I'm telling you, I was a really bad beginner. Without my team, and especially my co-founder, Andy, perhaps you can just get in quickly. I would have never done that. Franck, I can absolutely feel after you what that means, having like, what did you say? 10,000 pictures, like on a more or less average, how do you say?
Your first 10,000 photographs are the worst. That's what the famous photographer said.
Can you imagine? I mean, I rather count seconds, then I will get to the 10,000 much faster being your moderator. So thanks a lot for having you with us, Franck, and talk to you soon. My dear audience, another enlightening 3 hours have passed. Thanks to all of you being with us, and especially to all our amazing contributors around the world. Let me try to summarize the main topics we touched in the last 3 hours, although my brain is also burning. We have seen how synthetic data can solve the current problems organizations face while anonymizing data, and that it also solves problems surrounding data access and utility. We have heard multiple different visions of the future where AI is making our life easier and more pleasurable, but still has a component of human agency. The disruptive technology development and how COVID has accelerated the automation revolution, and the sixth AI wave was another highlight. Thank you again for being an active part of this future-driven community, and thank you for being with us today. I would like to repeat myself what I said at the beginning. Please share with us on our social media with the whole community the experience and be together. Let's unite for a strong community that stands for respect, tolerance, and peace, no matter where you come from or what culture you have. This is what we sow today around the globe. So in this sense, why wait? Act now, share for success, but much more important, make peace. Thanks a lot for being with us and see you soon. Bye.